Chapter 43. After dinner, Xia Ji lay on the bed and slept on Lin's pillow, covering Lin's quilt. Of course, it was Lin's bed. Xia Ji's behavior was straightforward. She never said polite words. She was also quiet, which made her special. Only when she slept did she really look like a little girl. Her eyelashes were curved like a pair of fans, her breath was light and long, and her almost perfect white face was full of innocence. Looking at the sleeping Xia Ji, Lin Sun smiled. He could feel that the little girl had a unique kindness, affection, and even dependence on him. Although he still couldn't determine Xia Solstice's origin, Lin Sun no longer cared about it. In his opinion, Xia Solstice's existence made his life no longer lonely and added a sense of steadiness and stability that he had never had before. Perhaps it was also a kind of emotional dependence. Lin didn't know about it, but he had already noticed that Xia Ji had integrated into his life. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, Lin held his breath and began to meditate. The third level of martial realm, body opening, emphasized on guiding the spirit to circulate the five viscera and consolidating the source. The next level was acuporoscope. The so-called acuporoscope was to dredge the acupoints all over the body. Acuporoscope led to spiritual concentration, and spiritual concentration led to sufficient qi and blood. After reaching this level, the practitioner's cultivation would undergo another transformation. Not only would his strength be doubled, but his body would also be further tempered and the impurities in his body would be removed. After the fierce battle 4 days ago, Lin had been keenly aware that his cultivation had been further consolidated and tempered. As long as he kept practicing hard, it might not take long for him to break through again. This was the benefit of actual combat. Through the baptism of blood and fire, practitioners would not only improve their fighting means, cultivation methods, and experience, but also further consolidate their cultivation. After the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, Lin Sun ran his spiritual energy through his body 36 times, then stopped meditating and began to meditate on star circulation. Needless to say, the meditating divine arts was indeed extremely marvelous and profound. Although it only had 3 realms, star circulation, moon transformation, and sun glory, every realm could be said to be all-inclusive, and the more one comprehended it, the more unfathomable and profound one felt. At this time, Lin Sun's sea of consciousness was covered with a starry sky. The starry sky was deep and vast, dotted with thousands of stars, but each star was out of reach and dim. It was really shameful. Although Lin had been practicing meditating magic day and night, he hadn't been able to step into the realm of star circulation until now. But no matter what, Lin Sun's soul was condensed and strengthened every time he meditated, which brought obvious benefits. Lin Sun's breath became long and deep. In his sea of consciousness, all his perceptions were concentrated, reflecting the billions of stars in the starry sky. When he was able to perceive the star path and use the star path to guide a ray of star radiance down, he would be considered to have truly stepped into the threshold of the star circulation realm. This step was also called lighting the stars. Lin Sun had no distractions, no desires, and just meditated quietly. In a trance, he seemed to fly up to the sky, flying thousands of miles, tens of thousands of miles without tiredness or desire. There was an instinctive force of nature pulling him up. He flew to the sky, flew beyond the 9th heaven, and flew to the vast and boundless starry sky. Countless stars were reflected. At this time, Lin Sun found that those stars were not fixed, but circulated along different trajectories. It was as if an invisible hand was controlling all of this. Every star's orbit was unconstrained and unconstrained, indescribably mysterious. Looking at it, the starry sky was like a chessboard, and those stars were the chess pieces in the chessboard. The circulation trajectory was the place where the chess pieces moved. Lin Sun watched and perceived it quietly. As time went by, an indescribable feeling arose in his heart. If the starry sky was the chessboard and the stars were the chess pieces, who could play this game? It was me. Lin Sun suddenly understood, and all his perceptions spread like a tide, like a ray of light rushing up to the starry sky, lighting up one of the stars. At that moment, it seemed that an invisible hand had placed a chess piece on the chessboard. The stars were the chess pieces. When they were lit up, the chess pieces came to life, and a real game and journey began. Clatter at the same time, in Lin Sun's sea of consciousness, in the dim starry sky, a vague star suddenly lit up, sprinkling a clear light across the void and falling in a Lin Sun's sea of consciousness. Lin Sun also suddenly became sober at this moment, and his soul felt an indescribable coolness and comfort from inside to outside, as if soaking in a hot spring. All his pores opened, and he was so comfortable that he almost moaned. The star circulation realm. Finally, he stepped into the threshold. Lin Sun was excited. It took him more than 2 months to unintentionally light up the first star in the sea of consciousness, which really surprised Lin Sun. At this moment, his perception spread out like a delicate spider web, and in a twinkling of an eye, it covered the courtyard where he lived. All the scenes in the courtyard appeared in his mind, including the grass swaying in the night wind, the crickets resting under the window lattice, a drop of cold dew on the edge of the well, and the weeping willows swaying in the moonlight. Everything was so clear, vivid, and ethereal. This was perception, a power from the soul. All this was also called the spirit comes out of the body, and all things reflect in the heart. Generally speaking, only after breaking through the martial realm and stepping into the gang spirit realm could practitioners have such a power of perception. But now, Lin Sun, who was only at the 3rd level of the martial realm, had achieved this step. All this was inseparable from the credit of meditating magic. Merely stepping into the threshold of the star circulation realm allowed him to possess such power. One could well imagine how profound this soul-refining technique was. This was indeed the entry stage. As far as Lin Sun knew, when one could use the power of self-perception to light up all the stars in the night sky and the sea of his consciousness and lead the starlight to shine on everything, he could be regarded as the consummation of star circulation. Lin Sun felt it carefully and found that he could perceive everything within a radius of 30 meters at most. Any further would be beyond his power. What? Lin Sun was about to get up and use the inscribing pen to inscribe a spiritual tattoo to test the specific changes brought by the strengthening of his soul. Unexpectedly, when he opened his eyes, he found that Xia Ji had put her head on his lap, sleeping lazily, with a trace of attachment on her beautiful and tranquil face. A rare smile hung on the corner of her mouth. Lin Sun thought for a while and carefully moved her head away. She frowned and muttered, "No." Then she hugged Lin Sun's leg. Lin Sun smiled bitterly. He had no choice but to wait for the test tomorrow, so as not to disturb the little girl's sweet dream. Lin Sun lay down and looked at Xia Ji beside him, thinking quickly about how to prepare for the second challenge of the heaven accessing place that would come soon. After a long time, Lin Sun also fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, Lin Sun got up and repeated the marching boxing in the yard. He didn't stop until his whole body was sweating and his blood was boiling. He washed his face and rinsed his mouth with the cold well water, put on a set of clean clothes, and then went into the kitchen to busy himself. Lin Sun clearly felt that he was full of vigor, and his 5 senses and 6 senses were all refreshed. Xia Ji immediately woke up when she smelled the fragrance from the kitchen. It seemed that in her world, sleeping and eating were always the most important things, which could not be neglected. While eating, Lin Sun suddenly thought of something and asked, "Xia Ji, have you practiced the body refining method?" Xia Ji shook her head blankly. "No." Lin Sun pointed at the huge hammer thrown in the corner of the yard and asked, "Then how did you make this huge hammer?" Xia Ji answered casually, "I made it with my hands." Lin Sun was speechless. Xia Ji frowned and looked at Lin Sun for a while. Then she asked, "Are you going to refine your body?" Lin Sun nodded. He thought for a long time last night. The second challenge of the heaven accessing place was called body refining, so it had something to do with body refining. Moreover, the number of challenges this time was 108, which proved that it was extremely difficult and had a high chance of failure. Under such circumstances, Lin Sun naturally had to prepare in advance. It would be better if he could further refine and improve his body. But to Lin Sun's regret, he didn't know how to refine his body except for some nourishing medicine soup with the flesh and blood of fierce beasts and various spiritual materials. There were many special methods for refining the body in the world, but Lin Sun didn't have any, and he couldn't find any in Feiyun village. In fact, according to the realm of cultivation, the 9 levels of martial realm were actually a kind of cultivation for the practitioner's body. The first level, Qi guiding, refined the sense of Qi inside the body. The second level, internal strength, refined the muscles and tendons of the limbs and bones. The third level, opening, refined the 5 viscera. The fourth level, orifices clearing, refined the acupoints of the whole body. The fifth level, marrow cleansing, refined the fascia and bone marrow. The sixth level, blood burning, refined the blood inside the body. The seventh layer of minor circulation realm was similar to the 8th layer of great circulation realm. It was a comprehensive tempering of one's flesh, tendons, bones, acupoints, and internal organs. Small circulation was the preliminary practice. The great heavenly cycle was a further tempering. The 9th level, spirit transformation, involved tempering one's spiritual energy along with one's body, causing it to undergo a transformation. All the practice in the 9 levels of martial realm was to lay a solid foundation for the practitioner so that he could smoothly condense Gang Qi from the spiritual energy when he reached the Gang spirit realm. But obviously, Lin Sun was only at the 3rd level of martial realm. If he wanted to further refine his body, it would be difficult to do so in a very short time without other means. Shiaji thought for a moment and said, "How about we fight?" Lin Sun was stunned. Fight? Shiaji nodded seriously. Yes, fighting with pure physical strength is also one of the most direct ways to refine the body. Lin Sun was surprised. How do you know? Shiaji was confused. After thinking for a long time, she shook her head. I don't remember, but I know it's not wrong. Lin Sun gritted his teeth and decided to believe in Xia Ji this time. Anyway, let's have a try. P.S. Thanks to Xia Ji's Piaohong for the reward. You've become the first supreme master since the beginning of the Tianjiao War. Applauding. Chapter 44. After dinner, Lin Sun stood in an open space in the courtyard, took a deep breath, and looked at Xia Ji. Let's get started. Fighting with physical strength was one of the most direct and effective ways to refine one's body. Lin Sun wanted to have a try to see if the little girl's words were true. Xia Ji got up unhurriedly and stood 3 meters away from Lin Sun. She rolled up her sleeves unhurriedly, revealing her white arms. Then she raised her little face and looked at Lin Sun with her clear black gem-like eyes, saying, "You attack." Lin Sun was in a daze. To be honest, it was a little difficult for him to attack a girl who was only 5 or 6 years old and whose height was only up to his chest. Although he also knew that Xia Ji's fighting capacity was incredibly strong, he always felt a little uncomfortable to bully a little girl. However, when he saw Xia Ji's serious expression, Lin Sun finally gritted his teeth and punched her with tiger roaring in the forest. Whoosh, the fist force produced by physical strength shook the air, showing a strong and heavy momentum, like a fierce tiger coming out of the mountain. It could be seen that Lin Sun's practice of marching boxing had indeed reached the level of precision, and he could precisely display the essence of the boxing. But in the face of this punch, Xia Ji didn't move at all. She just raised her arm and clasped Lin Sun's wrist with her white and tender fingers, which were as firm as iron tongs. Lin Sun was shocked. When he was about to struggle, Xia Ji's arm shook slightly. With a bang, Lin Sun's whole body trembled violently like a cloth that was about to be lifted up, and then he fell to the ground heavily. All his bones seemed to be broken, which made him grimace in pain and gasp for breath. Compared with the physical pain, Lin Sun was extremely shocked. This blow was as fast as lightning, and he was suppressed to the ground before he could react. Lin Sun could clearly feel that Xia Ji didn't use her spiritual power. In other words, she just defeated him with just a shake of her wrist. Lin Sun got up and looked at Xia Ji awkwardly. There was no trace of contempt in his eyes, but seriousness and seriousness. At this time, Xia Ji also frowned and said doubtfully, "Your control of physical strength is too poor. Even the fiery bristled boars in the mountains are better than you." Lin Sun's face darkened at once. How could a 5 or 6-year-old girl say that he couldn't even compare to a pig? It was simply a disgrace. Boom! Exhaling like thunder, Lin jumped to his waist, clenched his fingers into a fist, and launched a move of Songling, suppressing the moon. This move was both offensive and defensive. Lin Sun didn't believe that he could be defeated by this little girl. However, he only felt his vision blur, and then his wrist was grabbed again. With a bang, his entire body was like a meteorite, fiercely smashing into the ground, causing dust to fly into the air, and his face to be bruised and swollen. Too pathetic. No matter how shrewd Lin Sun was, he was just a 13-year-old boy, a promising and hot-blooded teenager. How could he tolerate such a disgrace? Again, Lin Sun didn't care about anything else. He shouted and rushed out again. This time, he learned his lesson. He crossed his arms and stretched his fists like a big bow. It was the iron chain crossing the river in marching boxing. Xia Ji couldn't touch his wrist at all with her height. As expected, this time, Xia Ji frowned and suddenly rushed forward. Her footsteps were like dragons and snakes rising to the land. She suddenly rushed into Lin Sun's line of defense and kicked Lin Sun's knee with her toes like a drill. Lin Sun suddenly felt that his right leg was numb, as if he had lost consciousness. His body suddenly staggered and almost fell to the ground. At the same time, his wrist was grabbed by Xia Ji again and shook slightly. The familiar scene happened again. Lin Sun once again had a deep hug with the earth face to face. The ground shook a little and the dust rose. When Lin Sun got up, his hair was disheveled, his face was swollen, and his clothes were covered with dust. He was extremely embarrassed. He stared at Xia Ji with mixed feelings in his heart, including shock, surprise, doubt, anger, shame, and so on. Xia Ji seemed to be unaware of it. She frowned at Lin Sun, and her quiet and beautiful white face was full of doubt. "Lin Sun, you are indeed much worse than the fiery-maned pig. Are you more stupid than the fiery-maned pig?" Boom! Hearing this, Lin Sun felt a rush of blood to his head, and an unspeakable sense of shame and indignation burned all over his body like fire. How could she say that he was inferior to a pig? How could she say that he was stupider than a pig? Lin Sun almost fumed with anger. With his eyes wide open, he roared and rushed up again. Bang! Xia Ji curled her lips and raised her hand with flagging interest. She shook it slightly and pressed Lin Sun to the ground again. Again, like an unkillable cockroach, Lin Sun got up and rushed over again without hesitation. The strong sense of shame stimulated his fighting spirit and made him forget everything and put aside all kinds of distractions and restraints in his heart. At this moment, he was like a teenager who did not want to admit defeat. It was also at this moment that Lin Sun looked like a real 13-year-old teenager, hot-blooded, passionate, angry, unwilling, and happy and angry. Bang! He was beaten down again. Again. Bang. Again. Bang. This afternoon, in the courtyard of Lin Sun's house in the east of the village, such noises kept ringing out one after another. The noises made people panic and frightened a flock of skylarks that originally lived on the weeping willow tree to flee in panic. When Shurao Tonren, the village head, heard the noise and entered Lin Sun's house, he saw Lin Sun being carried by Xia Ji like a broken sack and thrown to the ground. Shurao Tonren was dumbfounded and rubbed his eyes hard, thinking it was an illusion. But soon, he was sure it was not an illusion. The teenager who saved Feiyun village from the abyss of suffering and was worshipped by all the villagers was now beaten beyond recognition by a 5 or 6-year-old girl. Shurao Tianren could not help but be in a trance. It was crazy. How could the world become like this? It was so hard to understand. Shurao Tonren came to discuss the mining of Feiyun fire copper with Lin Sun, but after seeing such a scene, he left resolutely. Shurao Tonren felt that he needed to calm down and sober up. What he saw just now was so thrilling that he was in a trance. It was not until the sun set that the courtyard returned to its former tranquility. Gritting his teeth, Lin soon staggered with his wounded and almost broken body, took off his tattered and dusty clothes, and jumped into the prepared wooden barrel. In the barrel were all kinds of spiritual materials that had been cooked, which had a significant effect on repairing and strengthening the body. Phew, feeling the warm medicinal soup caressing the scars all over his body, Lin Sun could not help but exhale a long turbid breath with a comfortable face. However, when he saw Xia Ji at the side, his heart instantly twitched fiercely, and a wisp of shame and unwillingness appeared on his face before vanishing in a flash. For the whole afternoon, Lin Sun forgot how many times he had been suppressed. Every time, he felt as if he was being pressed by Mount Tai, and his bones almost fell apart. By now, his body had long been numb, and his strength was about to be exhausted. Every inch of his skin, flesh, tendons, and bones showed unbearable pain. If that was all, it would be fine. If it was just pain, he could grit his teeth and endure it. The only thing that Lin Sun could not accept was that he had been defeated many times in the whole afternoon, and they were all defeated by the same move. Lin Sun could not help but wonder if he was really more stupid than the fiery-maned boar. Lin Sun shook his head hard. He would never admit that he was worse than a beast. "I'm going to sleep." Xia Ji got up and walked into the room. "Oh, I'll be hungry when I wake up. Don't forget to cook." Lin Sun was stunned and almost cursed out loud. "I'm already like this, and you still want me to cook? You don't know how to pity me at all." Immediately, Lin Sun smiled bitterly and sighed as if he had accepted his fate. Sitting in the wooden tub, he raised his head and looked at the sky where the night was coming. All the emotions in his eyes gradually disappeared, and his eyes became clear and deep as before. In his mind, he silently meditated on the battle in the afternoon. Every detail was deliberated and gradually immersed in it. Xia Ji's fighting method was very simple. She defeated him with a grab and a shake. Her grab was as unbreakable as an iron hoop, and a shake was as clean and neat as a sieve. But when he thought about it carefully, there was a great deal of knowledge in it. For example, the strength of her grab was as fast as lightning and precise, just like a goshawk catching a rabbit. It would be fine if she didn't move, but once she moved, she would definitely hit the target. This kind of ability was a test of eyesight and speed. It was not very mysterious, and anyone could do it as long as he practiced hard. What really moved Lin Sun was the strength of the shake. It was like a sieve conveying the power of vibration like a tide, which violently shook and collapsed all the muscles of his body, and his bones almost fell apart. This was too terrible. How on earth did Xia Ji achieve this with just the strength of her body? Lin Sun was lost in thought. As the night fell, the sky was sparsely dotted with stars, vast and deep. The efficacy of the medicine in the wooden tub had been swallowed up. Lin Sun's numbness and tiredness were swept away. Without hesitation, he put on a clean suit and began to prepare dinner. The battle with Xia Ji in the afternoon was actually very meticulous. Lin Sun seemed to be beaten miserably, but all the wounds were skin and bones were not hurt. When Lin Sun thought of it, he guessed that Xia Ji should have been merciful, but he didn't know how much of her strength she had used when the dinner was ready and placed on the table. Xia Ji immediately appeared. Lin Sun smiled and said casually while serving rice to the little girl, "I've roughly figured it out." Xia Ji answered. She took a piece of animal bone as thick as an arm and chewed it while saying, "If you still can't figure out such a simple thing, you are really too stupid." Lin Sun was speechless. Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun decided to ignore the inadvertent blow in Xia Ji's words. He spat out 4 words from his lips in a serious and firm tone. "Let's continue tomorrow." Every word was sonorous, but Xia Ji always felt there was a trace of bitterness and unwillingness in his voice. She couldn't help looking up at Lin Sun, tilting her head and saying thoughtfully, "Diligence can make up for one's inadequacy, and clumsy birds fly early. These are the 2 words I have just learned, and I think they are very suitable for you now." Lin Sun's face darkened at once. Was this little girl addicted to torturing him? What did it mean to make up for one's inadequacy? What did it mean to be a clumsy bird? Was he such an unsightly image in her mind? Let's eat. Gritting his teeth, Lin Sun glared at Xia Ji and vented all his emotions on dinner, stopping the conversation that made him full of frustration. Chapter 45. The next morning, after breakfast, Lin Sun got into position and looked at Xia Ji, who was standing 3 meters away from him. He was full of fighting spirit. Last night, he hardly rested. After cultivating his spiritual qi and soul, he had been deducing Xia Ji's fighting skills in his mind. This was a kind of fighting with only physical strength. The purpose was to refine his physique. But after yesterday's fiasco, Lin suddenly understood that as long as his physique was strong, he could master the technique of exerting force, which could also be regarded as a real means to kill the enemy. Like Xia Ji, she didn't need to use spiritual energy at all, but her fighting capacity was already terrible. Let's start. Xia Ji looked tranquil. The soft light of the morning evoked a dazzling and holy aura on her beautiful face. Whoosh! Without hesitation, Lin Sun stepped forward like a galloping horse, with a heavy momentum. If one looked carefully, the muscles on his body bulged up like ripples that rose and fell. All his strength was concentrated, and his entire body was like a fully drawn bow that was accumulating strength while waiting to be shot. Tiger roaring in the forest. This punch was completely different from yesterday's. It was simple, neat, and direct. The strength of the arm sank into the spine along the shoulder blade, driving the muscles of the ribs to exert force together. All the muscles suddenly twisted like taut steel wires. Boom! The air was rubbed by this punch and made a dull explosion. Xia Ji was still unperturbed by this. She turned over her palm and clasped Lin's wrist again. However, before she exerted her strength, she felt that Lin's wrist muscles were shaking at an extremely high frequency, which made him as slippery as a loach. In a flash, he got rid of her iron-like palm and fingers. Lin Sun's eyes brightened. Sure enough, as long as he mastered the technique of exerting force, he could move every joint and bone of the body as easily as he wanted. In the past, he only knew how to use spirit energy as the main method of battle, and it was only after some contemplation last night that he understood that every inch of his skin, tendons, skin, and joints contained formidable strength. As long as he was able to drive them together and circulate them in his heart, he would be able to exert unimaginable strength. It was like comparing the body to a battlefield. Every inch of muscle and joint was like soldiers distributed on the battlefield. As long as they could be commanded in unison, they would be able to unite into the most powerful army. But before Lin was happy, Xia Ji's fingers suddenly flicked on Lin's wrist like a snake. Lin felt his wrist was numb, and then he lost consciousness. Then, with a bang, Xia Ji grabbed him by the arm and shook him again. His body was like a sieve as he fell to the ground. Gritting his teeth, Lin Sun stood up and rushed forward again. The tip of Xia Ji's brush just now happened to pierce his wrist joint, breaking his continuous muscle strength and causing him to lose consciousness. Lin Sun didn't need to think about it to figure it out. Therefore, when he fought again, he began to guard against it carefully. However, after merely 2 moves, he was once again beaten to the ground. This time, he was defeated by Xia Ji's unexpected lock wrist. Her hands were like iron hoops, locking his wrist. Her left hand pushed forward and her right hand pulled back, showing a kind of opposite impact force, directly dislocating his wrist joint. Her action was crisp and neat. With a crack, Lin's wrist hung down softly. Not until he was knocked to the ground did he feel a sharp pain in his wrist. This was called separating tendons and dislocating bones. When Lin Sun put his wrist joint back together, there was no trace of frustration in his eyes when he looked at Xia Ji. Instead, his fighting spirit was blazing like fire. Although he was defeated after only 2 moves, he was much stronger than yesterday, which made Lin Sun very clear that he was making rapid progress. Go on, Lin Sun shouted in a low voice and exerted force again. However, he had abandoned the inherent framework of marching boxing, no longer rigidly sticking to the moves. Instead, he exerted force with his palms and fingers more freely. Bang, bang, bang. In the following period of time, a series of rising and falling sounds once again rang out in the courtyard, causing one's heart to tremble. It was unknown when the gate of the courtyard was opened, and a group of little kids came in. They were all children in the village. When they saw Lin Sun, their adored martial arts master, was defeated by Xia Ji again and again, they couldn't help but open their mouths wide and gasp. Xia Ji was only 5 or 6 years old, the same age as many little kids, or even younger. But now she defeated Lin Sun again and again, which was really incredible. Seeing Lin Sun hit the ground again and again, even they felt frightened. They secretly rejoiced that they hadn't provoked Xia Ji before, otherwise the consequences would be unimaginable. Before long, a group of uncles and aunts in the village also heard the news and came to watch the fun. They also felt distressed about Lin Sun's experience, but they were more shocked by Xia Ji's fierce fighting power. Not until now did they know that this incredibly beautiful little girl turned out to be even stronger than Lin Sun. Was she really a little girl of 5 or 6 years old? Being surrounded by so many people, Lin Sun felt quite ashamed and annoyed no matter how thick-skinned he was. He gritted his teeth and didn't say a word, venting all his strength in the fight. As for Xia Ji, she still looked quiet and dealt with every move. She beat Lin Sun down again and again without mercy or giving him any face. Perhaps in her eyes, all this was for Lin Sun to refine his body, which was a serious matter. As for face and self-esteem, Xia Ji didn't have such concepts. After watching for a long time, seeing Lin Sun fall down again and again, even Shurao Tianren couldn't bear to see it. He stared at the villagers around and waved his hand, saying, "You have nothing to do? Then come with me to the smoking mountain of mine." He immediately dispersed the crowd and closed the gate, leaving the courtyard for Lin Sun and Xia Ji to concentrate on the fight. Until the night fell, Lin Sun jumped into the wooden barrel again with all his wounds, silently deducing the details of the fight during the day. Xia Ji went straight to bed. Days like this lasted for 5 days. During these 5 days, Lin Sun fought with Xia Ji in addition to eating, recovering his wounds with the help of medicine soup, and silently deducing the details of the fight. It seemed boring, but it was a very fulfilling process. During these 5 days, Lin Sun had mastered the skills of exerting force in his body. He could easily mobilize the strength of every muscle, joint, and bone in his body. Moreover, his physique had also changed significantly. Judging from the appearance, Lin Sun's body was still thin and slender, but under the thin appearance, every inch of muscle and skin seemed to have been hammered thousands of times. It was as hard as rock and as tough as steel wire. Every inch of tendons and bones seemed to have been polished over and over again like jade, as if they were made of fine steel. Even his qi and blood were stronger than before. Undoubtedly, the continuous failures in these 5 days seemed to be frustrating, but the benefits were also obvious. Lin Sun's physique was further refined and improved. This was undoubtedly an exciting thing for Lin Sun. However, during these 5 days, the fierce beast's flesh and blood, spiritual grains, and various spiritual materials stored in his house were consumed at an alarming rate. Not only did they consume a lot of materials to heal their wounds every day, even Lin Sun and Xia Ji's appetite had increased. Now, Lin Sun could eat half an adult snowspot leopard and 10 kilograms of spiritual grains a day. As for Xia Ji's appetite, it could only be higher than Lin Sun's. At this rate, all the fierce beast's flesh and blood in his house would be eaten up in less than half a month. As for the spiritual grains, they might not even last for a month. Lin Sun had to start thinking about how to replenish the materials. Fortunately, under the leadership of Shurao Tianren, villagers in Feiyun village had begun to dig the Feiyun fire copper. Now, they had harvested more than 50 kilograms of ore. If the impurities in the ore were removed, there would be about 25 kilograms of Feiyun fire copper left. If they were sold, they would be able to get a fortune. Lin Sun planned to go to Green Sun Tribe after a while. In addition to selling the Feiyun fire copper, he still had many valuable items that he could exchange for a lot of materials. On the fifth morning, when Lin Sun got up, he was surprised to find that Xia Ji was nowhere to be found. Only a note was left in the room. A line of crooked words was written on it. "I'll be back soon." Relieved, Lin Sun looked at Xia Ji's handwriting and wanted to laugh. It was so ugly that he almost couldn't recognize it. Lin Sun had taught Xia Ji these days. Although Xia Ji could communicate with him fluently, she was still illiterate. For the sake of her future, Lin Sun began to teach her how to read and write. Since Xia Ji said she would be back soon, Lin Sun didn't need to worry anymore. He went into the kitchen to prepare breakfast. When Lin Sun put the hot breakfast on the table, the gate of the courtyard opened. With a bang, a fierce beast like a calf with a flaming mane was thrown into the courtyard, causing the ground to tremble. It was a fiery maned boar. At this moment, it was tied up by thick and tough vines, and its mouth was stuffed with mud. It could only lie on the ground and groan, and its scarlet eyes were filled with anger and hostility. At the same time, Xia Ji's young and delicate figure came in. She washed her hands, sat at the table, and began to eat. Lin Sun looked at all this in a daze. He pointed at the fiery maned boar and asked, "You went out to catch this beast?" Xia Ji nodded and said seriously, "After you eat, go and fight with that boar. Only a bloody battle can let you know how strong your body is." Lin Sun's expression was a little complicated. "If I fail, does it mean that I'm not even as strong as a pig?" Xia Ji thought for a while and agreed. That's right. Lin Sun felt depressed. She was just joking before, but now she really wanted to catch a fiery maned boar. It was obvious that she wanted to embarrass him. "Don't worry, I won't be defeated by a pig." Chapter 46. The fiery maned boar was an extremely fierce beast. Its body was covered with flaming fur, which looked soft but was actually extremely tough and hard to be injured by swords. It had a violent temperament and unparalleled strength. The pair of tusks in its big mouth was enough to scare a practitioner at the 4th level of martial realm. Compared with the hot-tempered fiery maned boar, the snowspot leopard and the one-horned lizard could be regarded as tame. Boom! In the courtyard, when Xia Ji untied the vines on the fiery maned boar, the fierce beast suddenly roared and stamped on the ground with its 4 hoofs. Smoke and dust splashed everywhere. Its bull-like body was like a moving hill, fiercely rushing towards Lin Sun. Its sharp tusks were like a pair of sharp blades, shining with a bloodthirsty luster. Bang! Seeing this, Lin Sun flashed and punched the side of the fierce beast's neck. The fiery maned boar just shook its head as if nothing had happened. It suddenly turned around and stabbed its tusks at Lin Sun's abdomen like a sharp blade. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and dodged with a wrong step. He was a little surprised. Although the blow just now was just pure physical strength, it was enough to make a practitioner at the 4th level of martial realm unable to bear it if he was hit. But this fiery maned boar didn't have any effect at all. Boom! The fiery maned boar was extremely arrogant. It stared at Lin Sun with its scarlet eyes, and its huge body dashed forward. Lin Sun failed to dodge and had a fight with it. Suddenly, he felt like being hit by a huge rock. His chi and blood rolled over, and his body fell back uncontrollably. What a powerful force! Lin Sun's face darkened. His muscles tightened like steel wires, and his figure moved like a cheetah. He suddenly rushed forward and clamped one of the tusks of the fiery maned boar with his palms and fingers. Then he exerted strength in his wrists, and his arm muscles bulged inch by inch. The fiery maned boar, which weighed more than 500 kilograms, was forcibly lifted up. Then, the muscles of Lin Sun's arms undulated like a tide. All the accumulated strength gathered in his wrists and suddenly burst out, shaking them hard. Boom! The huge body of the wild bristled boar trembled like sifting chaff, and all its bones and tendons made cracking sounds. Lin Sun smashed it hard on the ground, creating a big pit. Lin Sun learned this strike from Xia Ji. With a shake, the power spread like a tide, which was enough to disperse all the power of the opponent. If it was serious, it could even shatter the internal organs of the opponent. But before Lin Sun had time to rejoice, the fiery maned boar shook its body and got up again. Its scarlet eyes were incomparably violent and ferocious. Howling, it rushed to Lin's son again. Lin's eyes widened at once. How could this beast be so powerful? As he dodged, he observed and found that the wild bristled boar did not seem to be injured at all. Instead, it became even more ferocious. Its forehooves moved as if they were flying as it charged about in the narrow courtyard, bringing with it a wave of smoke and dust. Cracks even appeared on the ground from its steps. If it weren't for Xia Ji, the collision would have destroyed all the 3 huts of Lin Sun's house. Bastard! Lin Sun was enraged. He would never admit that he couldn't even defeat a boar. If he did, how could he raise his head in front of Xia Ji in the future? Bang! Lin Sun stopped dodging and rushed forward. He stretched out his arms and suddenly collided with a wild bristled boar. He firmly grasped the boar's tusks in his palms and blocked the wild bristled boar. The wild bristled boar was obviously very angry. It exerted force on its forehooves and twisted its body violently, trying to break Lin Sun's arms. But at this moment, Lin Sun suddenly exerted force on his arms like a noose. With 2 cracking sounds, the wild bristled boar's tusks were broken and blood gushed out. The wild bristled boar roared madly in pain and almost sent Lin Sun flying. At this moment, Lin Sun lowered his body and locked the wild bristled boar's leg joints like a lock. With a fierce twist, the wild bristled boar's right foreleg joints were removed and its body fell down with a loud bang. This was not the end. Lin Sun seized the opportunity and removed all the joints of the wild bristled boar's limbs in a few breaths. The wild bristled boar completely lost its support and could only roar miserably on the ground. At this point, Lin Sun stood up, clapped his hands, and exhaled a long breath of turbid air. Looking at the wild bristled boar that had been completely subdued, he couldn't help feeling a touch of pride in his heart, although he was exhausted. A few months ago, he was still a weak guy. Now, he could suppress a fierce beast whose strength was comparable to that of a practitioner at the 4th level of martial realm with only his physical strength. How could Lin Sun not be excited by such a great change? In addition to his diligent practice day and night, he could achieve all this with the help of Xia Ji. It was the constant fighting with Xia Ji that made Lin Sun's body stronger day by day. His skin, tendons, and bones were as hard as iron and steel, full of explosive power. At the same time, through these days of continuous fighting, Lin Sun understood the tricks of physical combat and could easily gather the strength of every inch of his body. Even without spiritual energy, it seems that I can compete with a practitioner at the 4th level of martial realm with my current physical strength. Lin Sun thought for a moment and shook his head. Practitioners were different from ferocious beasts. They had equipment, weapons, and cultivation methods. But more importantly, they had wisdom and experience in fighting, which was not comparable to a beast at all. Therefore, it would not be so easy to defeat a practitioner at the 4th level of martial realm with physical strength. Xia Ji came over and patted the wild bristled boar's head with her white and tender little hand. The wild bristled boar fainted as if it was struck by lightning. Xia Ji looked at Lin Sun and said, "You're barely stronger than this boar." The trace of pride in Lin Sun's heart disappeared at once. He shrugged helplessly and said with a bitter smile, "Can't you praise me?" Xia Ji frowned and thought seriously. "Is there anything worth praising about you?" Lin Sun was speechless at once. At lunch, Lin Sun thought of a question. Compared with spiritual energy, physical strength is only suitable for close combat. No matter how strong the body is tempered, it seems that the strength obtained by concentrating on cultivating spiritual energy is not as powerful as that obtained by cultivating spiritual energy. Hearing this, Xia Ji didn't say a word. She put her fingers together like a knife and gently cut. A sharp airflow swept out and cut off a weeping willow branch more than 30 meters away. Lin Sun was stunned at once, and Xia Ji buried her head in the food again. After a long while, Lin Sun said with a complex expression, "How on earth do you cultivate?" Just now, he clearly saw that Xia Ji's attack did not have a trace of spiritual power at all. It was completely condensed from the strength of her body. In other words, this fact undoubtedly proved that when physical strength reached a terrible height, it could completely break the shackles of close combat. As far as Lin Sun knew, even if one cultivated spiritual energy, only after stepping into the gang spirit realm could he achieve the stage of releasing spiritual energy and killing enemies at a distance. Compared with this, Xia Ji could exert force at a distance only with her physical strength, which was more and more remarkable. Xia Ji doubted, "It's easy to do this. I've known it since I could remember." Lin Sun didn't feel discouraged this time. Instead, he really believed it. Through these days of observation, he found that there were too many incredible things about Xia Ji. She was no different from the legendary genius who was born with knowledge. Otherwise, who could see such a terrifying fighting power of a 5 or 6-year-old girl? Lin Sun thought for a long time and finally gave up the intention of getting to the bottom of it. Instead, he asked the name of this fighting skill of Xia Ji. In his opinion, this kind of physical combat skill was just like a martial art, which should not appear out of thin air. Xia Ji shook her head. "No name." Lin Sun smiled bitterly. "Then let's give it a name." Xia Ji answered absent-mindedly. Lin Sun seemed to be in high spirits. After thinking for a while, he said, "Let's just call it separating tendons and dislocating bones." These days, he had mastered many skills of physical combat, such as the vibration skill produced by a shake, the strangulation skill with 2 arms, the clavicle skill, and so on. These skills were all simple, direct, and neat, specifically aimed at the enemy's vital parts. Just like separating tendons and dislocating bones, it was really ruthless and decisive. Xia Ji nodded perfunctorily, but it didn't dampen Lin's enthusiasm. With bright eyes, he said with assurance, "This martial art still needs to be perfected, but I believe that with our wisdom, this martial art will definitely become more and more powerful. Maybe in the future, it will be famous all over the world and leave its name in history." Xia Ji didn't seem to hear him at all and continued eating. After talking for a long time, Lin Sun felt bored when no one agreed with him. He shook his head and said, "Forget it. It's not urgent. We can talk about it later." At this time, Xia Ji suddenly looked up at Lin Sun and said, "Didn't you say you were going to the Green Sun tribe a few days ago?" Lin Sun nodded and said, "Well, if everything goes well, we can set off in 5 days." The reason why he said so was that according to his calculation, the second test of the heaven accessing place would come in 3 days. Before going to the Green Sun tribe, he naturally had to solve this matter. As he refined his body these days, Lin Sun gradually became more confident and looked forward to the second test of the heaven accessing place. Thinking of this, Lin Sun suddenly realized something and said, "Why do you ask this?" Xia Ji said, "I'm a little reluctant. It's okay. I'll be back soon." Lin Sun felt warm in his heart. Although this little girl had been beating him up these days, she still had a conscience. But the next moment, Xia Ji shook her head and said, "I'm just thinking, if you suddenly leave, who will cook for me?" Lin Sun's expression suddenly froze. It turned out that she was reluctant to leave. He said fiercely, "Don't worry. Even if I leave, I won't let you starve to death." Xia Ji said with a tranquil look, "That's good." Saying this, she began to eat again. At the same time, a dazzling rainbow suddenly flew over the deep mountain forest dozens of miles away from Feiyun village. Chapter 47. The rainbow swept across the sky like a gorgeous waterfall. When it reached the sky above the deep mountain forest, the rainbow suddenly stopped and turned into a flying carpet with an area of more than 10 meters. The surface of the flying carpet was engraved with dense spiritual tattoo formations, shining brilliantly as if it had intelligence. It was absorbing and releasing the spiritual chi of heaven and earth all the time, which was extraordinary. Obviously, this flying carpet was an extremely precious flying spiritual weapon. At this time, a man and a woman were standing on the flying carpet. "Young master, why do you stop here?" The woman was puzzled. She wore a black dress, had a slender waist, and a graceful figure. She had a bright and beautiful oval face, and her black eyebrows were straight. However, the space between her eyebrows carried an aura that was as sharp as a blade. She was like a wild rose with thorns, delicate and beautiful, but full of thorns. If there were bigwigs in Donglin Town here, they would definitely recognize that this woman was Mu Wansu, known as Black Rose. At the same time, she was also the person in charge of Keystone Business, the first chamber of commerce in Donglin Town. Keystone Business was one of the few chambers of commerce in Xiao Empire, with influence all over the world and many branches in the vast territory of Xiao Empire. It could be said to be as rich as a country. Fortune Godshur, the behind-the-scenes boss of Keystone Business, was a legendary figure in the empire. It was said that his wealth was so astronomical that even the most powerful members of the imperial family could only envy him. As a Black Rose, Mu Wansu could become the person in charge of the branch of Keystone Business in Donglin Town. It could be imagined that she was not a simple person, but such a person was standing there with a little subservience at this moment, with a hint of admiration for the man beside her in her tone. "Don't you see that there should have been a battle here not long ago?" The man looked down with his hands behind his back. He was tall and strong, with shoulders as broad as mountains. His face was firm and broad, and his eyes overflowed inadvertently with a profound and disdainful breath. Just by standing there casually, he gave people a sense of oppression as if they were looking up to a high mountain, which was extremely frightening. "Battle." Mu Wansu narrowed her beautiful eyes and looked carefully. As expected, she found that the forest below had obviously suffered terrible destructive power, and shocking traces of battle were exposed everywhere. "Young master, you have good eye," Mu Wansu praised in surprise. The man who was addressed as the eldest young master didn't care about this kind of flattery at all. He continued, "If I'm not wrong, it's the 9th brother of the Xie clan from the Black Cloth Alley of the imperial capital who made a move. However, his opponent is somewhat thought-provoking. The 9th son of the Xie family?" A flash of inspiration flashed in Mu Wansu's mind, and the image of a handsome figure in a jade-green robe suddenly appeared in her mind. She asked in surprise, "The 9th young master of the Xie family who has recently risen to fame in the empire and is praised as Young Sword King. Except for Shai Yutong, who else can display the sword scripture of Unstoppable? This sword manual has a great history, and it's rumored that it's only a fragment and not complete. But even so, it still possesses a terrifying power that can shake the heavens and the earth and kill ghosts and gods." A wisp of a blazing bright light suddenly flashed within the eldest young master's eyes when the topic of martial techniques was mentioned. "It's just a pity that we're a step too late. Otherwise, we would be able to seize this opportunity to witness the might of the sweeping sword." There was a hint of regret in his voice. Mu Wansu was stunned, and her heart was in turmoil. It was really the young sword king, Shai Yutong. Xiao Empire was extremely vast. As the capital of the Forbidden City, there was a very famous alley called Black Clothed Alley. Right now, almost all of the influential and powerful upper echelons of the empire were entrenched in the Black Cloth Alley. The Xie family was a martial arts family with a 1,000-year history in the empire, which had been entrenched in Black Clothed Alley. As a descendant of the Xie family, the young sword king, Shai Yutong, was very famous. It was rumored that he was a first-class cultivation genius. When he successfully mastered his ancestral sword scripture of Unstoppable last year, he caused a sensation in the whole Forbidden City and became famous. It should be noted that no one had been able to master the sword scripture of Unstoppable since it was inherited from the Xie family for nearly 100 years. Although Mu Wansu was not a resident of the Forbidden City, as a person in charge of Keystone Business, she had naturally heard of it. That was why she was so shocked at the moment. So, the 9th young master of the Xie family had come to the 3,000 mountains long before us? After Mu Wansu calmed down, she soon realized the key of the problem. It must be so. The eldest child nodded. Now everyone in the Forbidden City knows that the flamen of the observatory has observed a strange phenomenon in the 3,000 mountains. It is said that a peerless treasure is likely to be born. I'm afraid that Shai Yutong is also here for this. Then he frowned. I'm just curious about who Shai Yutong has fought with. Muwansu thought for a while and took out a map. After a brief identification, she pointed to the distance and said, "There is a village called Feiyun dozens of miles away from here. Maybe we can go there and have a look." The eldest child was surprised. "There are people living here?" Muwansu said with a smile. "Before we set off, I specially inquired about the 3,000 mountains. I know by chance that someone once found a small Feiyun fire copper vein here." As they spoke, they drove the flying carpet under their feet and flew away. On the way, Muwansu introduced the origin of Feiyun village to the eldest child, and then he suddenly understood. A moment later, they appeared in the sky above Feiyun village. No wonder these villagers can survive. It turns out that they have reclaimed the spiritual fields. The eldest child looked at the spiritual fields below and said thoughtfully. Immediately, he stopped and pointed to the east of the village, saying, "There are spiritual fluctuations there. There should be cultivators living there. Let's go and have a look." At dusk, Lin Sun had already prepared dinner. There were 6 big pots of fragrant animal meat and a pot of white spiritual rice. Lin Sun and Xia Ji sat at the desk under the weeping willow in the courtyard and concentrated on eating. There were only 3 days left before the challenge of heaven accessing place. Lin Sun didn't intend to refine his body anymore. He wanted to take advantage of these 3 days to recuperate and build up his energy for the challenge. I've already roughly summarized the tendon dislocation bone locking technique. It's divided into 5 major tricks, namely shock, twist, lock, drill, and collapse. Of course, this is only a preliminary arrangement. In the future, when I study more combat skills, I'll further improve this combat technique. While eating, Lin Sun introduced quickly. Whether Xia Ji heard him or not, she concentrated on eating, as if Lin Sun's words were not as attractive as the food in the bowl. Lin Sun didn't seem to be angry and just talked to himself. Learning and summarizing were a habit Lin Sun had developed when he was with Master Lu since childhood. Because Master Lu never explained anything, Lin Sun often had to comprehend, learn, and summarize any problems and gains by himself. Although the practice of martial arts was different from that of spiritual tattoos, the principles were the same. While talking, Xia Ji suddenly put down her chopsticks and raised her little face to look at the sky in the distance. A trace of solemnity flashed through her dark, jewel-like crescent eyes. Someone is coming. Lin Sun was shocked. Usually, if it was a resident of the village, Xia Ji wouldn't have such a reaction. This could only mean one thing. Someone had come to Feiyun village. Let's continue eating. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun decided to deal with changes by remaining unchanged. "Oh." Xia Ji lowered her head and continued eating. "It smells so good." Just a moment later, a tall figure came uninvited and pushed the door open, followed by a woman in a black dress. They were the eldest child and Muwansu. The eldest child's eyes swept over the animal meat and animal skin hanging on the walls, and then fell on the boy and the little girl in front of the stone table in the center of the courtyard. "May I ask who you are?" Lin Sun stood up and asked, cupping one hand and the other before his chest. He was secretly surprised by the unfathomable breadth of the boy and the girl. Obviously, they were extremely powerful. Just by facing them, Lin Sun felt a kind of pressure blowing on his face. "Oh, we're just passing by," the eldest child said, and came to the stone table. He looked down at the 6 pots of animal meat on the table and said, "Green vine python, green feather mountain marten, striped tiger. These dishes are really rich. I haven't tasted them for a long time. No wonder they smell so good." Lin Sun squinted and suddenly smiled. "In that case, if you don't mind, you can sit down and have a taste. Then I won't stand on ceremony." The eldest child smiled and sat down. He took a pair of chopsticks and began to eat heartily. Indeed, he didn't stand on ceremony at all. Looking at him, it was as if he were in his own home. Even Muwansu, who followed beside him, was slightly stunned. It seemed that she didn't expect that the eldest child would be interested in these dishes. With such a high status, he had eaten all kinds of delicacies in the world. Muwansu didn't understand. She glanced at Lin Sun and felt relieved when she found that he was just a teenager on the third level of martial realm. Although Lin Sun was also curious about the purpose of the boy and the girl, he was a little relieved when he saw that they didn't show any bad intention after coming in. However, he wouldn't relax his vigilance before he figured out their purpose. "I'm going to bed." Suddenly, Xia Ji stood up and turned around to leave. Since some time, she had covered her face with a hat, so Mu Wansu didn't pay much attention to her and only regarded her as Lin Sun's younger sister. Only the eldest child inadvertently glanced at Xia Ji's back. He seemed to notice something and frowned imperceptibly. But finally, he shook his head and continued to chew the animal meat piece by piece. Lin Sun saw all these small details. Seeing that Xia Ji didn't make any special reaction, he was relieved. "Little brother, would you like a cup of wine?" The eldest child invited Lin Sun with a smile. Nobody knew when he took out a pot of wine, and the intoxicating fragrance of the wine filled the air. "Then I won't stand on ceremony." Lin Sun walked forward and sat down with a smile, looking happy and at ease. Seeing this, Mu Wansu couldn't help but take another look at Lin Sun. A touch of surprise flashed in her beautiful eyes. Few people could remain so calm in front of the eldest child. Chapter 48. Although she was a little surprised by Lin's calmness, Mu Wansu's face changed slightly when she saw the flagon the child took out. "Child," Mu Wansu couldn't help but speak with a touch of anxiety on her face. "Don't worry." The child waved his hand to stop Mu Wansu from talking. Then he picked up the flagon and poured a cup for Lin. The wine was dark green in color, crystalline and translucent like amber, and it emitted a light, elegant, and continuous fragrance that gladdened the heart and refreshed the mind. Looking at the cup, Lin's eyes brightened. Good wine. He noticed Mu Wansu's expression earlier, and he'd roughly guessed that this wine was either a highly poisonous thing or an extremely expensive and rare wine. In Lin's view, the latter was more likely. After all, if the man and the woman really wanted to kill him, they didn't have to do this with their terrible breath. As he said, Lin raised the cup and drank it up, and then his eyes brightened again. After the wine entered his mouth, it was like the spring rain, permeating with warm, spiritual energy and spreading to his limbs and bones. In just one breath, Lin felt that the spiritual energy in his body was gradually boiling, saturated, and flowing as if it was cheering. Lin couldn't help but praise again. "It's really a good wine." Seeing Lin Sun drink so straightforwardly, the child couldn't help but look at him in surprise, and then he said with a smile, "This wine is called 4 Seasons, brewed by Master May of the Heaven Workshop of Green Deer School. The first cup is like the spring breeze sneaking into the night, moistening everything silently." As he said, he poured another cup for Lin. "Have a taste of the second cup." Lin Sun didn't stand on ceremony and drank up the cup. He only felt a roar, as if a scorching torrent broke through the dam and poured into his mouth. The burning and violent airflow made Lin Sun shiver all over, and his skin turned red inch by inch. His face instantly flushed. It felt like being in a hot summer. The hot air, like a furnace, was steaming inside and outside his body, and every acupoint and pore was gushing abundant spiritual energy. Lin Sun opened his mouth wide and stuck out his tongue, saying, "The same pot of wine has 2 different unique flavors. Master May of Green Deer School is really a great brewer." Hearing this, Mu Wansu couldn't help but feel speechless. What kind of person was Master May? He was a first-class pharmacist in the Empire. This pot of wine of 4 seasons was a priceless treasure even in the forbidden city of the imperial capital. Only the most powerful and influential people could enjoy it. As the person in charge of Keystone business in Donglin Town, Mu Wansu was also a powerful figure, but she still didn't dare to have a taste of 4 seasons. But now, the eldest young master had used this wine to entertain a youth from a remote village. Besides causing Mu Wansu to be speechless, she couldn't help but feel envious in her heart. This kid was ignorant, but his luck was extremely good. No one knew what was on Mu Wansu's mind. The young master laughed and said to Lin Sun, "The second cup is just like the scorching sun entering the throat and the fire running to the heart. It's all about the word scorching. Looking at Lin Sun's red cheeks, he said, "Little brother, can you drink the third cup?" Lin Sun did feel a little dizzy, not because he couldn't bear the wine, but because the spiritual energy in his body suddenly soared after only 2 cups of wine, like a mountain torrent suddenly surging in a small pond. He was almost out of control. Obviously, the so-called Four Seasons wine was a kind of spiritual wine, and it was an extremely precious and rare spiritual wine. Lin Sun forced himself to run his cultivation and drove the surging spiritual energy in his body to circulate constantly with his qi, trying to digest the efficacy of the wine. At the same time, he said with a smile, "Since it's Four Seasons wine, it would be a pity if I don't taste the third and fourth cup." How shameless this guy is, Mu Wansu thought to herself. She could tell that Lin Sun had obviously experienced the benefits of the wine of Four Seasons. Logically speaking, he should decline it in fear and trepidation. After all, it was so expensive that no one would dare to take the initiative to ask for it. But this brat, he looked like he wanted a yard after being given an inch. Child was also stunned. He looked at Lin Sun for a moment and said, "To tell you the truth, little brother, you really surprised me. Ordinary practitioners in martial realm will fall to the ground drunk after drinking the first cup of wine because they can't bear the spiritual energy in it. But you are obviously different from them." Lin Sun's eyes were blurred, his cheeks were burning, and his words became slurred. "Well, maybe I'm really good at drinking." Child smiled and poured the third cup of wine for Lin Sun. Suddenly, he pointed to the beast's meat and hides hanging around the courtyard and said, "Little brother, did you kill all these fierce beasts?" Lin Sun shook his head. "No, there was a battle in a distant forest a few days ago. Most of these fierce beasts were affected at that time and died on the spot. But I got lucky." Battle. Child and Mu Wansu's eyes were fixed at the same time. Lin Sun seemed to be drunk at the moment and said to himself, "You don't know yet, but both sides in that battle were strong practitioners in Sea Spirit Realm. One of them was walking on a sword like a sword immortal. Sure enough, it was Shai Yutong." Child, and Mu Wansu confirmed another judgment. Who was his opponent? Mu Wansu couldn't help asking. "I think he was called Voodoo Barbarian." Lin Sun frowned and thought for a moment, then said, "I don't remember clearly." As he spoke, he drank the third cup of wine. This time, the taste of the wine was refreshing and sweet, and it gurgled like a stream in an empty valley. It gave off a feeling of spaciousness, as if he was situated in the autumn sky with thin clouds, and it was lonely and bleak. Boom! The spiritual energy in Lin Sun's body was like an erupting volcano, roaring and tumbling, rumbling and scouring the meridians all over his body, becoming more and more violent. Even after being constantly refined by the spiritual vortex of heart vessel and 4 acupoints, it was difficult to restrain the trend of spiritual energy skyrocketing. If it went on like this, it would cause irreparable damage to his body. Lin Sun gritted his teeth and stopped thinking about it. He took a deep breath, sat cross-legged on the ground, and started to break through regardless of anything else. Child and Mu Wansu were not too surprised by his abnormal behavior. On the contrary, Lin Sun's current behavior was normal. It should be noted that wine of 4 seasons was specially brewed for practitioners above Gang Spirit Realm, which contained enormous spiritual energy. It was incredible that Lin Sun, a teenager at the 3rd level of Martial Realm, could insist on drinking 3 cups of wine. What really attracted their attention at this time was the Voodoo Barbarian mentioned by Lin Sun. There are strong practitioners of the Empire of the Dark in the 3,000 Mountains. Did they also find out about the abnormal phenomenon of the peerless treasure? Child frowned, his resolute eyebrows full of killing intent. The Empire of the Dark, standing in the depths of the turbulent wasteland, was the mortal enemy of Ziyao Empire. Since Shai Yutong said so, it can't be wrong. But I didn't expect that after 1,000 years, the Empire of the Dark began to move again. Mu Wansu pursed her lips, and a touch of worry appeared in her beautiful eyes. "Let's not talk about this. I'm just curious whether Shai Yutong has found the peerless treasure mentioned by the Flamen." Child's eyes were full of cold light. Mu Wansu didn't know how to answer. There were too few clues. Unless she found Shai Yutong himself and asked him, all speculations were unreliable. Child obviously understood this. He immediately shook his head and looked at Lin's son, who was sitting on the ground to practice. Mu Wansu also looked at him and couldn't help but ask in a low voice, Child, why do you entertain this person with the treasure of wine of 4 seasons? It's too wasteful. Child shook his head, indicating that she didn't need to say more. Seeing this, Mu Wansu was confused, but it was not appropriate to ask again. After a short time, Lin's son, who was meditating, opened his eyes. He was full of spiritual energy. In a short time, his temperament had changed a lot. Compared with the past, he was more fierce, just like the unsheathing of a sword. In his body, the vigorous and pure spiritual energy flowed through the meridians and acupoints, passed through the heart vessel and the 4 acupoints, circulated along the 5 viscera, and returned to the meridians. Compared with the past, the acupoints in his body faintly glowed, making the blood and chi in his body surge with it. This was the 4th level of martial realm, orifices clearing. As the saying goes, the acupoints are connected to the gods, and the gods are full of chi and blood. Reaching this level meant that the chi and strength of practitioners would undergo another transformation. Congratulations, little brother. You've taken another step forward on the road of cultivation. Child cupped his hands with a smile. Lin's son hurriedly got up and saluted. Thanks to the wine, child. Otherwise, how could I get such a blessing? Child laughed and waved his hand. Don't mention it. It's just a cup of wine. Please sit down. Lin's son gladly accepted the order. This promotion was so accidental that he felt a little unprepared. But when he thought about it carefully, he knew that he had unconsciously owed Shai a big favor. But Lin's son wouldn't say it out. Who knew whether Shai Child did it on purpose or not? If there was a chance in the future, he would pay it back. If there was no chance, he would pretend that it had never happened. Lin's son was not that kind of old-fashioned and stubborn person, and he would not immediately be grateful to Shai Child just because he owed Shai Child a favor. Looking at Lin's son sitting down naturally and calmly, Mu Wansu couldn't help but think highly of him. If it were someone else who got such an opportunity, who could maintain such a well-mannered attitude? To tell you the truth, I came to 3,000 Mountains this time to look for a peerless treasure. It said that there was a strange phenomenon here nearly 3 months ago. Little brother, do you know about it? Child said casually and poured the 4th cup of wine for Lin's son. I don't remember. Lin's son shook his head. If there was any strange phenomenon in the past few months, I must remember it clearly. But I really can't think of any strange phenomenon. Other people in the village can also prove this. Child said, oh, and fell into meditation. Mu Wansu frowned and asked, Little brother, are you sure? Before Lin's son answered, Child waved his hand and said, well, don't ask more. I know what I'm doing. Mu Wansu was a little dissatisfied and glared at Lin's son. It was fine that this boy didn't know how to be grateful after drinking wine of 4 seasons, but he couldn't give any valuable clues, which really annoyed her. But she also knew that a poor boy like Lin's son probably wouldn't know the secret about the peerless treasure. At this time, the gate of the courtyard was pushed open. Shirao Tenrun, the village head, said excitedly, Good news. Today we have gained a lot. His voice stopped abruptly. Chapter 49. Shirao Tianren came at the wrong time. This was Lin's first thought. When he saw the villagers following behind Shirao Tianren, he couldn't help but feel nervous. Each of the villagers was carrying a huge sack on his back, which contained the Feiyun fire copper ores that they had dug out. What made Lin's head hurt was that the 2 little kids also came with a piece of Feiyun fire copper in their hands, which could not be concealed anymore. Lin's mind flashed, but he had taken the initiative to greet them and said with a smile, Uncle Shirao, put these things down. Shirao Thurin nodded blankly and led the villagers to move quickly, directly ignoring the 2 strangers in the courtyard. They also sensed that something was wrong with the situation. Although they were puzzled, no one asked any questions. Even the 2 brats were hugged tightly by the adults to prevent them from talking. At last, Lin Sun winked at Shurao Tianren. The latter understood tacitly and hurried away with the villagers. Feiyun Fire Copper. Seeing all this, Mu Wansu opened her mouth. Didn't you say that the small vein had been excavated long ago? Sister, you may not know this, but I accidentally broke into that abandoned mine a few days ago and found that there was an undiscovered vein in the deepest part of the mine. Lin Sun explained frankly since he couldn't hide it anymore. It's a big fortune. Mu Wansu took a deep look at Lin Sun. Child Shurao was also surprised and said, Spiritual fields, ferocious beasts, and Feiyun Fire Copper. Your village is really good at making money. Lin Sun shrugged and smiled bitterly. Child, you may not know this, but Feiyun village is located in the depths of 3,000 mountains, and the nearest Green Sun tribe is more than 2,000 miles away. Although we have some ores, spiritual grains, and prey, it's not easy to exchange them for wealth. Child Shurao smiled and saw through Lin Sun's concern at first glance. But he didn't point it out and said, This is indeed a big problem. Lin Sun sighed exactly. Child Shurao pondered for a while, took out a token and threw it to Lin Sun. There is a chamber of commerce in Green Sun tribe called Keystone Business. If you want to exchange materials, you can go there with this token. Eldest young master, you mustn't. Mu Wansu was shocked and said, This token is something you always carry with you. It's too precious. How can you give it away so easily? Lin Sun originally intended to decline, but when he saw this scene, he couldn't help but grasp the token tightly. It's useless for me to keep this with me. I might as well give it away. Moreover, how can I take back something that I, Shi Xuan, have given away? The eldest young master spoke indifferently, and his tone was calm, yet revealed a strand of arrogance. Mu Wansu was still anxious and said, But this, the eldest young master waved his hand and said, It's settled then. You don't have to say anything else. He turned to Lin Sun and said, Little brother, it's fate that we can meet here. If you go to the Forbidden City one day, you can come to Keystone Business to find me. Goodbye. With that, he turned around and left. Seeing this, Mu Wansu glanced at the token in Lin Sun's hand unwillingly, and then glared at Lin Sun fiercely, trying to make Lin Sun hand it over voluntarily. But Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of it and simply ignored her. He turned his head and solemnly said to the eldest young master in the distance, Child, I will repay your kindness today in the future. Seeing this, Mu Wansu knew that the shameless teenager had made up his mind to take the token. She gritted her teeth and whispered, Boy, I'll settle accounts with you later. Lin Sun suddenly showed an expression of fear and trepidation, but his voice was loud and clear. Sister, what account do you want to settle? Is it because I didn't take good care of you just now that you are angry with me? As soon as these words came out, Mu Wansu secretly knew that she was in trouble. Sure enough, the voice of the eldest young master soon sounded in the distance. Ha ha, little brother, don't be angry. Wansu is just joking with you. Wansu, hurry up. Mu Wansu was both angry and annoyed. She didn't expect that the teenager in front of her could be so shameless. Though she thought so, she still put on a sweet smile on her face. With her beautiful eyes sparkling, she said in a sweet voice, Little brother, I remember that the Green Sun tribe is not far from Donglin Town. If there is a chance, we will definitely meet again. As she said this, her black dress swayed, and she floated away. Don't worry, sister. If there is a chance, I will definitely go to Donglin Town to see you. If someone bullies me, I will have to ask you to help me. Lin Sun said loudly with a smile. Mu Wansu, who had just walked out of the door, paused. Thinking of Lin Sun's shameless and cunning look, she couldn't help but gnash her teeth with hatred. Little bastard, since you dare to call me sister, I will let you have a taste of my means when there is a chance in the future. Mu Wansu cursed in her heart and hurried away. If she didn't leave soon, she was really worried that she couldn't help but beat the hateful little bastard. It was not that Mu Wansu was stingy, but she was very clear about the weight of the token worn by the eldest child, Shi Xuan. The identity of the token was not only the identity, but also the unimaginable power. But now, this token was casually thrown by Shi Xuan to a village boy. How could Mu Wansu not be anxious? But what was done could not be undone, so Mu Wansu had to accept it. Watching the two leave, Lin Sun stood there quietly for a long time until he saw a streak of rainbow flying away. Then he let out a long breath of turbid air and lay on the chair like a broken skeleton. What he had experienced just now seemed to be calm and peaceful, but Lin Sun felt more tired than a fierce fight. Whether it was the eldest young master Shi Xian or the woman called Wansu, both of them were extremely powerful. Not only were they powerful in terms of cultivation, but they were also smart and resourceful. Sitting with such people, Lin Sun seemed to be calm, but he was nervous all the time, not daring to be careless. Although it was all over now, Lin Sun still had some doubts in his heart. The eldest child, Shi Xuan, should be a strong man with a high status. His purpose of coming here was also easy to speculate. It must be for the so-called peerless treasure. The key point was that if Lin Sun's speculation was right, the time when the heavenly vision mentioned by Shi Xuan happened to be nearly 3 months ago, the day when Lin Sun cracked the secret of the heaven-accessing place. Was there any connection between them? Lin Sun didn't dare to talk nonsense, but he would never tell anyone about it. What puzzled Lin Sun was that it seemed that people like Shi Xuan didn't have to entertain him with such a precious thing as wine of 4 seasons, and even gave him a token before leaving. Why'd he do that? Lin Sun didn't believe that there was such a thing as a pie falling from the sky. Even if there was, it would never fall on him. However, Lin Sun couldn't figure out Shi Xuan's mind no matter how hard he thought about it. Finally, he had to give up. As long as Shi Xuan didn't show any malice, it was enough. There was a glass of wine on the stone table. It was winter wine of 4 seasons. Lin Sun took it and drank it up. He felt a bone-chilling coldness piercing his throat like a knife, and then turned into countless tiny cold currents flowing all over his body, making him shiver all over. This wine was really amazing. It came from the same pot, but it was divided into 4 different flavors and contained extremely terrifying spiritual power. Even with his current cultivation, Lin Sun could only refine 20% of its power, and most of the remaining power was suppressed and stored in his body. It wasn't absolutely a good thing to have a surge of power. Once one advanced too fast, it would easily lead to an unstable cultivation foundation, which would cause great hidden trouble for future cultivation. What Lin Sun pursued was the perfect cultivation state of water overflowing when it's full. So he attached great importance to the tempering of cultivation foundation. He didn't want to blindly pursue rapid advancement, which would make his cultivation path narrower and narrower. That was like seeking fish from a tree, and the loss outweighed the gain. At the same time, a flying carpet spiritual weapon was galloping in the clouds far away from the sky. Child, why did you do that just now? Now that there were no outsiders, Mu Wansu couldn't help asking the question she had been suppressing in her heart. I knew you couldn't help asking. With his hands behind his back, Shi Xuan's tall and sturdy figure was as unshakable as a mountain. If I said it was just a whim of mine, would you believe me? Mu Wansu was in a daze and shook her head honestly. But I do believe in this kind of fate, Shi Xuan said indifferently. This lad is about the same age as my 3rd brother, but it's rare that he doesn't have a trace of arrogance that a young man should have. What's more, his courage, wisdom, and adaptability are also outstanding. A small place like Feiyun Village is doomed to be unable to keep such a person. Mu Wansu sneered. I think he's just a shameless and cunning thief. He's not as good as you said. Shi Xuan smiled and looked down at the mountains and rivers in the distance calmly. He said, You don't understand. There's a kind of person in the world who will burst into dazzling brilliance as long as he is given a chance. It's too early to talk about this. Whether he's a dragon or a snake, we'll know in the future. Mu Wansu didn't expect that the child would have such a high evaluation of a countryside lad. She couldn't help but look serious. Thinking about it carefully, from the moment he suddenly entered Lin Sun's house to the things that happened in the middle, Lin Sun's bearing and words were indeed not what a country boy should have. However, when Mu Wansu thought of the cunning look Lin Sun showed before leaving, it was hard for her to regard this lad as an outstanding person with great potential. Mu Wansu sighed. I'm just worried that this lad won't understand your intention. There are too many ungrateful people in the world." The corners of Sir Schwann's mouth curled up into a smile. "It's just some wine and a useless token. What's the big deal? Even if he doesn't remember me in the future, it doesn't matter. Do you think I'll care about making a lad feel grateful to me?" Mu Wansu answered without hesitation. "Of course not." What a joke. Who was Sir Schwann? He was the eldest son of fortune god Sher, the behind-the-scenes boss of Keystone business. He was a first-class dazzling figure among the young generation in the Forbidden City. Most importantly, Sher Schwann was a strong practitioner of Sea Spirit Realm who could compete with Shai Yutong, the young Sword King. Perhaps it was just as Sher Xian had said, everything he had done just now was merely a form of fate that he had conveniently done. Chapter 50. Lin Sun held the token in front of his eyes and examined it carefully. The token was made of a special kind of jade, and it was engraved with a dense spiritual tattoo pattern. It was heavy in the hand. On the back of the token, there were 3 gilded ancient characters, Keystone business. If Lin Sun guessed right, the spiritual tattoo should be a unique symbol of Keystone business. With this token, I can solve a lot of problems. Lin Sun carefully put the token into the storage ring and began to think about going to Green Sun Tribe to exchange materials. A few days ago, Wu Henshui, the deacon of a medicine shop, was killed by Xia Ji. According to Lin Sun's speculation, Wu Henshui would not let it go. Now that he had the token of Keystone business, maybe he could start from this token to solve the hidden danger of Wu Medicine Shop. Anyway, I have to go to Green Sun Tribe. Lin Sun's eyes were full of thoughts. Green Sun Tribe was the closest place to Donglin Town in the 3,000 Mountains. According to the village head Shurao Timurin, it was comparable to a prosperous town. Whether it was to solve the living problems of the villagers in Feiyun Village or for his future cultivation, Lin Sun had to go there. But before that, Lin Sun had one more thing to solve, the second test of Green Cloud Path in Heaven Accessing Place. At night, Xia Ji woke up from her sleep. She walked out of her room and watched Lin Sun busy in the kitchen. After a long silence, she said, "Lin Sun, I want to become stronger." Lin Sun was stunned. He quickly brought out the cooked dishes one by one, and then looked at Xia Ji with a serious face and asked, "Why do you think so?" Xia Ji pursed her lips and said, "No reason." The little girl's expression was as tranquil as before, but an unprecedented firmness appeared in her pitch-black eyes. Lin Sun was silent for a moment. Thinking of what happened during the day, he vaguely understood and said, "The man and the woman are not bad people." Xia Ji shook her head and said, "I don't know what is good or bad. I only know that if I don't become stronger, I will be very passive when I meet people who are more powerful than me. I don't like this kind of passivity." Lin Sun nodded and said, "I see." He did understand that Xia Ji's worldview might be simple, but she was born with a keen insight and knew what she needed. Just like today, when eldest young master Sher Schwann and the others came, Xia didn't even eat her favorite food and directly turned around and went into her room. At that moment, she must have realized that she was no match for Sher Schwann and could only choose to temporarily retreat. Lin Sun asked while filling her bowl with rice, "How do you plan to become stronger?" Xia Ji picked up her chopsticks and thought for a long time before she said, "Fight. As long as I fight with powerful people, I can quickly become stronger." Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. The answer was beyond his expectation and made him distressed. It was a helpless way to become stronger. If they had the guidance of the elders in the sect, if they had all kinds of powerful inherited cultivation techniques, if they had abundant cultivation resources, who would choose to become stronger by fighting? Unfortunately, both Lin Sun and Xia Ji were now alone, like a pair of orphans who could only rely on themselves. Lin Sun finally made up his mind and said, "Let's talk about it later. I'll give you an answer in a few days." Xia Ji nodded. She had never questioned or resisted Lin Sun's decision, which was a kind of complete trust. And it was this trust that made Lin Sun secretly decide to take Xia Ji away to Donglin Town after he solved the problem in Feiyun Village. By any means and at any cost, he would find her the best place for cultivation. Lin Sun absolutely didn't want to see Xia Ji fighting with powerful enemies, which was too dangerous. 3 days passed in a flash. At night, Ji had fallen asleep. The starlight floating in from the window sprinkled on her quiet and beautiful white face, giving off an innocent atmosphere. Lin Sun sat cross-legged, his handsome face calm like an ancient well. In the sea of his consciousness, wisps of consciousness rushed to the mysterious bloody gate, the gate to heaven, that had been floating quietly like a tide. Just for a moment, a familiar feeling came over him, as if he was walking in time and space. In a trance, he appeared in that mysterious space again. The straight green cloud path went straight to the distance, and at the end was the mysterious and towering gate to heaven. Standing on the green cloud path, Lin Sun looked around and couldn't help sighing with emotion. This was the heaven accessing place. What kind of person made it? An obscure wave swept over Lin Sun's body in an instant. The next moment, a cold, empty, and emotionless voice sounded in this world. Practitioner, the second test of Green Cloud Path is called body refining. You have 108 chances to pass it. Every time you fail, you will have 3 days to rest. If you fail all 108 times, you will fail, and the heaven accessing place will be sealed again. I see. Let's start. Lin Sun looked calm, with a touch of determination in his clear and deep eyes. Let's begin. Along with the voice, a light curtain suddenly gushed out from the green cloud path, which was like a vast ocean with raging waves sweeping across the sky. Before Lin Sun could react, a huge whirlpool of water gushed out from the light curtain, like a black hole, and swallowed Lin Sun instantly. The test of body refining is open. The place is the battlefield of spiritual tattoos, mill waterfalls. The conditions for passing the test are to break through the waves and reach the peak. In the dark room, Ji, who was sleeping soundly, suddenly opened her eyes. When she saw Lin Sun sitting cross-legged, she couldn't help but close her eyes again. But just for a moment, she opened her eyes again with a touch of confusion on her face. In her perception, Lin Sun seemed to evaporate out of thin air, leaving not even a trace of his breath. But when she opened her eyes, she found Lin Sun in front of her, which made her confused. She opened her dark eyes wide and stared at Lin Sun for a long time. After making sure that he was real, she closed her eyes again and began to sleep. But as soon as she closed her eyes, she lost Lin Sun's breath, which made Ji feel inexplicably agitated for the first time. After a long time, the little girl fell into a deep sleep. Rumble, the deafening sound of flowing water, echoed in his ears like a clap of thunder. When Lin Sun opened his eyes, he saw that he had appeared in a boundless sea. The blue sea was vast and mighty, intersecting with the sky. Less than 3,000 meters away, there was a mountain peak that pierced the sky. The mountain peak was extremely unique. Huge waves that were like white dragons poured down from the peak of the mountain, rumbling as they crashed into the surface of the sea, causing huge waves to rise. From a distance, it was like a water mountain, with hundreds and thousands of waves rushing down from the top, which was spectacular. At the same time, a series of information about passing the test appeared in Lin Sun's mind, which made him instantly understand that if he wanted to pass the test, he must face the falling waves and climb to the top of the mountain. Lin Sun's face suddenly became solemn. Now that he was only at the 4th level of martial realm, it was not difficult to climb the mountain. The difficulty was how to break through the pouring waterfalls. There was no way to dodge. Lin Sun looked carefully. The mountain was extremely high, probably thousands of meters high. Heavy waterfalls fell from the top of the mountain, like roaring water dragons. If he wanted to climb to the top of the mountain, he could not avoid the impact of those waterfalls. There were 108 chances to pass the test, which seemed to be a lot. But Lin Sun was very clear that the more it was, the more difficult it was to pass the test. Lin Sun would never waste these chances to pass the test. I'm afraid the key to this test is how to resist the impact of those waterfalls. If I want to climb the mountain, I must be steady. Once I fall down, it means that I fail the test. Since this test is called body refining, maybe I should start with physical strength. As for spiritual energy, it may not be useful anymore. Lin Sun stepped forward and found that although he couldn't fly, he didn't feel any sinking when he stepped on the sea, as if he was walking on the flat ground. This might be some special arrangement of the spiritual tattoo battlefield. Lin Sun didn't think too much and didn't rush to climb the mountain. Instead, he spent a full hour to carefully observe the mountain around. There was no shortcut. After confirming this fact, Lin Sun also gave up the idea of taking shortcuts and carefully came to the foot of the mountain. The rolling waterfalls, like roaring dragons, poured down from the top of the mountain with a terrible force, splashing thousands of waves. Even standing at the foot of the mountain, Lin Sun felt a suffocating sense of oppression. He tried to run the spiritual energy in his body and found that it seemed to be imprisoned and couldn't be used at all. This proved even more clearly that this test tested the strength of one's body refinement. Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun raised his head and looked at the magnificent picture. He couldn't help feeling lofty in his heart. How comfortable it would be if he could set foot on this mountain and conquer it. Without hesitation, Lin Sun's flesh, blood, tendons, and bones were like taut bowstrings. His muscles bulged, and the strength of his body was condensed to the extreme, like a fully drawn bow. Then he stepped forward and stepped on a rugged rock at the foot of the mountain. Boom! In an instant, a waterfall rushed down and hit Lin Sun hard. Lin Sun staggered and almost flew out. This blow was even stronger than the full blow of a practitioner at the third level of martial realm. Lin Sun was shocked. His toes were like iron claws, and he exerted the strength exertion skill of 1,000 pounds falling to the surface of the rock to stabilize his body. But even so, he had to bear the impact of the waterfall all the time, which felt like someone with a giant hammer constantly smashing on his body. It was unbearable pain. Lin Sun knew clearly that he couldn't stop here. If it went on like this, he would be finished sooner or later. Gritting his teeth, he stretched out his arms to face the impact of the waterfall. His fingers suddenly inserted into the rock wall. At the same time, he jumped up and climbed up. Boom! Boom! However, in just a moment, 2 consecutive waterfalls rushed to him. Lin Sun didn't have time to react, and his whole body was knocked out. Fuck! It's too difficult. In the air, Lin Sun couldn't help swearing. The next moment, he returned to the green cloud path of the heaven accessing place. The seeker failed for the first time. At the same time, the hollow and cold voice sounded. Chapter 51. In the room shrouded in darkness, Lin Sun gasped for breath. Every inch of his skin was tingling as if being pricked by needles, and his clothes were soaked in cold sweat. I didn't expect that the second test would be more perverted than I expected, Lin Sun murmured, but he was not discouraged. He had expected that the chance of success in his first attempt was small. What he didn't expect was that he failed in a hurry at the beginning, which was hard for Lin Sun to accept for a while. Glancing at Xia Ji, who was sleeping soundly, Lin Sun didn't feel sleepy at all. He walked out of the room alone, intending to take a cold bath. Walking out of the room, Lin Sun didn't notice that a faint smile appeared at the corner of Xia Ji's mouth, which disappeared in a flash. In her sleep, she felt Lin Sun's existence again. Although she didn't know what happened to Lin Sun, as long as she could feel his breath, Xia Ji felt an unprecedented sense of security. It was already late at night, and the sky was shining with a faint luster. In the courtyard, Lin Sun was soaking in a wooden barrel, feeling the cold feeling of water moistening his skin, and the tingling all over his body faded a lot. The second test will start in 3 days, but I'm afraid I'm doomed to fail according to my current physical strength. Lin Sun leaned against the barrel, staring at the vast night sky in a trance. The water mountain that stood towering above the ocean was 3,000 feet tall. The current was rapid, and the waterfall was like a dragon. The force of the impact was so great that it was unimaginable. Wanting to ascend the mountain while facing the waterfall was practically impossible. Lin Sun even doubted that even if he refined his body to the 9th level of martial realm, he wouldn't have much hope to pass this test, let alone now. It's really a headache. Lin Sun couldn't come up with a solution after thinking for a long time, so he couldn't help sighing. What? But soon, Lin Sun suddenly noticed that the strength of his body seemed to be recovering at an incredible speed. Every inch of his skin, tendons, bones, and flesh produced a feeling of numbness, as if they were growing. Lin Sun's mind was immediately attracted. Sensing carefully, he found that there was a faint, strange power in his body, which was constantly integrating with his body. And his body that had been tingling not only recovered quickly, but also became stronger than before. This unexpected change refreshed Lin Sun at once, and he suddenly remembered the situation when he left the heaven-accessing place for the first time a few months ago. At that time, he thought he had passed the first test of Green Cloud Path, and the reward he got was only a meditating magic. Who would have thought that even the wounds on his heart vessel and 4 acupoints would not exist? Instead, he had condensed 4 spiritual vortexes. Not only that, but also from that time, his thin and weak body was greatly improved. Could it be that every time I enter the heaven-accessing place, I can improve my body imperceptibly? Or perhaps the changes in my body are related to my attempt to break through the barrier of body refinement? Of in Lin, in he, and he of the in he of in, and the body of Lin of heart, he and of in, and of in, and just now, the stinging pain all over his body was the after effect of being hit by the waterfall. But now, it seemed like it was also a kind of training for his body. It was possible. When Lin Sun thought that this test was called body refining, he could only use his physical strength instead of spiritual energy. He felt more and more that the faint, strange power in his body might come from the mill waterfalls. This discovery cheered up Lin Sun, who was originally depressed. He hurriedly dried his body and put on clean clothes. Standing in the courtyard, he began to practice marching boxing. Hoo! 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 The wind generated by his fists shook the air. Feeling his physical strength carefully, Lin Sun found that his strength had improved a lot. In the past, he could only make the air vibrate with a full-force punch, but now he could do it with a casual strike. From the looks of it, even if I fail, I can't give up on those opportunities to challenge the trials. If I can improve my physique time and time again, my strength will only become stronger. Correspondingly, the difficulty of the trials will gradually become easier for me. The more Lin Sun thought about it, the clearer his thoughts became. That should be it. This is the real purpose of body refining in the second test of Green Cloud Path. It is to train my physique. Even if I fail many times, I can still face failure more calmly. Like the first test of the Green Cloud Path, it seems that it is only to comprehend and grasp the mystery of the flowing light spiritual tattoo. Who would have thought that the real mystery of the flowing light spiritual tattoo is the secret of practicing the meditating magic? It seems that I have underestimated the trials on Green Cloud Path. Who can imagine that behind each trial there is an unimaginable mystery? At this moment, Lin Sun felt that he was suddenly enlightened. Standing alone in the boundless night, his eyes were as bright as stars. Another 3 days passed. At night, Lin Sun entered the heaven-accessing place and tried the mill waterfalls again. Because of his stronger physique, Lin Sun climbed more than 6 meters high this time before he was smashed out by the torrents of the 3 waterfalls. Compare with this failure, Lin Sun cared more about the change in his physique. After careful perception, he found that his previous speculation was right. After this test, his physique became stronger again. Lin Sun calculated that if he tried every 3 days, 108 times would take him 3 or 2 or 4 days, which was almost a year. If he could improve his physique every time, the benefits would be immeasurable. More than that, he could also refine his physique in different ways during daily cultivation. With such superposition, he could imagine how strong his physique would be at that time. All this also rekindled Lin Sun's fighting spirit to conquer the second test of Green Cloud Path. It's a pity that I have to go to Green Sun Tribe because I have accumulated too many goods. Otherwise, I would like to spend all my time on cultivation. That night, Lin Sun sighed. He had promised Shirao Tunrin, the village head, that he would set off for Green Sun Tribe more than 2,000 miles away tomorrow. The next morning, at the entrance of Feiyun village, Lin Sun waved goodbye to the villagers, riding a tall and handsome scaled horse. I'll wait for you to come back. Standing beside the scaled horse, Shirao Ji raised her little face and said seriously, if you don't come back, I'll definitely go to find you. Okay. Lin Sun smiled, which was indescribably brilliant in the morning sunshine. Nay. The scaly horse let out a long neigh and galloped away with Lin Sun on its four hooves. Shirao Ji gazed at it for a long time until Lin Sun's figure disappeared from her sight. Then she withdrew her gaze and returned home alone. Her young and delicate figure looked very lonely. Some villagers wanted to invite Shirao Ji to their homes. After all, Lin Sun was gone and no one would cook for her, which was too pitiful for a little girl. Shirao Tunrin, the village head, stopped them and shook his head. There's no need to do that. Shirao Ji is different from others. We just need to take good care of her. The villagers thought about it and agreed with him. Shirao Ji was very unique, totally different from other children. Even Lin Sun was no match for her. Coupled with the indifference and alienation that Shirao Ji exuded, none of the villagers dared to approach her rashly. I just hope little brother Lin Sun can come back as soon as possible. Shirao Tianren took a deep breath and murmured. The boundless mountains, like the backbone of the world, stretched up and down, dotted with mountains and rivers. As far as the eye could see, it was desolate everywhere. This was the 3,000 Mountains, located in the southwest border of Xiao Empire. It had been called the natural moat since ancient times. It was said that there were many ferocious beasts and numerous dangerous areas in the 3,000 Mountains. Once an ordinary person set foot in it, he would definitely die. Rumble, the scaled horse, galloped, kicking up dust. On its back was an animal skin bag more than 3 meters high, weighing at least hundreds of kilograms. Inside were some fierce beast skins, bones, sharp claws, and other materials. There were also some spirit herbs and spirit materials that grew deep in the mountains. Of course, compared with these visible goods, the goods in Lin Sun's storage ring were the most valuable. That was 150 kilograms of Feiyun fire copper. It was not an ore, but a refined pure Feiyun fire copper of amazing value. Riding on a scaled horse, Lin Sun didn't rush at full speed. The 3,000 Mountains were too dangerous, with dangerous mountains and rivers everywhere. One careless move, and he would run into danger. In addition, this was the first time Lin Sun went to the Green Sun tribe alone. He only knew that he would arrive at the destination in about 3 days if he went all the way to the north. As for the specific road conditions, he had no idea at all. Under such circumstances, he naturally had to be more cautious. Fortunately, there was no other danger until noon, except for some beasts along the way. The noon sun was scorching. Seeing that the scaled horse was already out of breath, Lin Sun didn't go on. He slowed down his pace and found a dense forest, where he dismounted and took a rest. Lin Sun took out some dried beast meat and chewed it to replenish his strength. In his mind, he was thinking about what to do when he arrived at the Green Sun tribe. After 30 minutes, seeing that the scaled horse had enough rest, Lin Sun immediately mounted it and planned to continue his journey. Boom! Just at this moment, the earth in the distance suddenly shook violently, as if there was an earthquake. From a distant mountain peak, huge rocks poured down with a rumble. At the same time, there was a burst of beast roaring in the forest, full of horror. Even the scaly horse he was riding was restless and restless. Lin Sun felt a strong sense of danger in his heart. He looked around, but found nothing at all. What was going on? Right at this moment, a bright golden light suddenly charged out from the extremely distant mountains. The light was dazzling, and one could faintly see that it seemed to be an enormous golden claw. Chapter 52. The giant claw, which looked like it was made of gold, rose up and covered the sky. At that moment, even Lin Sun was frightened and felt cold all over. What the hell was that? But just a moment later, the giant golden claw disappeared, the golden light in the sky faded away, and everything returned to normal. The earth was no longer shaking. That scene was so abrupt that Lin Sun couldn't imagine why such a shocking scene would suddenly happen. Until he calmed down, Lin Sun drove the scaly horse forward, but he was more careful than before. The 3,000 mountains were really dangerous and unpredictable. He had encountered such a horrible scene when he was less than 1,000 miles away from Feiyun village. It was most likely an unimaginable fierce beast. Dozens of miles ahead, Lin Sun saw the traces of the mountain collapse. Many rocks, ranging from tens of thousands of kilograms to hundreds of thousands of kilograms, were scattered among the mountains. This area was also very creepy. The ground was scorched black and barren, which formed a sharp contrast with the luxuriant forest in the distance. That place was full of vigor and vegetation, but here it was dead silent, and everything was barren, appearing desolate and forbidding. Lin Sun remembered that the giant golden claw he just saw came from this area, but he couldn't tell where it came from. After arriving here, the scaly horse began to be restless again, its four hooves trembling, as if it was about to fall to the ground. Lin Sun's heart also palpitated, and his hair stood on end. He didn't dare to stay any longer, so he chose a roundabout way and carefully bypassed this area. It wasn't until he ran for dozens of miles that the palpitations in his heart disappeared, and the scaly horse also returned to its former tame and calm state. Weird. Lin Sun pondered for a long time, but still couldn't figure out the reason. He shook his head and continued on his way. Only in the evening, when night was about to descend, did a surging river appear before them. It was grand and powerful, the waves surging violently as it surged between the mountains and lofty ridges. Under the setting sun, the water was dyed orange like burning blood, which was quite spectacular. Lin Sun got off the horse and came to the riverbank. He found a safe place near a pile of rocks, planning to rest here for the night and set off tomorrow morning. He caught 2 fish from the river, set up a bonfire, and began to prepare dinner for himself. The scaly horse was lying lazily on one side, snoring. The atmosphere was exceptionally peaceful. At the same time, a group of people were dashing hastily a few tens of kilometers away. The person in the lead was a young man in an embroidered robe. He had narrow eyes, a hawk nose, and a gloomy and ruthless bearing. Beside him were over a dozen experts, and every single one of them was extraordinary. This was especially true of a gray-robed old man. Although his figure was emaciated, when his eyes opened and closed, violet electricity flowed about, and his aura was like an abyss, shocking to the extreme. However, at this moment, the old man's face was a little pale, especially on his shoulder. There was a shocking wound. His skin and flesh were split open, and his bones were faintly visible. Although the wound had stopped bleeding a long time ago, strands of golden light were still burning, causing the wound to be unable to heal. Haha, it's all thanks to Elder Xing Teng that we were able to snatch that treasure from that bastard. When we return, I'll definitely ask my father for a reward on your behalf. The young man in front suddenly laughed out loud, his voice filled with excitement and pride. Young master is too kind. This old man doesn't deserve it. The gray-robed elder forced a smile. His face was pale, and the wound on his shoulder was still being burned by the golden flames. It was clear that he was suppressing this pain, and his brows were tightly furrowed. Elder Xing Teng, are your injuries really fine? The young man asked with concern. Although the power of the true flame of the mysterious sparrow is extremely vicious, as long as you give me some time, I'll be able to destroy it. However, I can't fly anymore, which delays your journey. Xing Teng, the gray-robed elder, was obviously very respectful to the young man, and his words were quite humble. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it takes some time. What's more, if I fly, I'm afraid I'll be found by that bastard again. If it catches up with me, there will be endless troubles in the future. Speaking of this, the young man suddenly thought of something and couldn't help laughing proudly again. Elder Xing Teng, do you think this treasure is the peerless treasure mentioned by the flamen on the observatory of the Forbidden City? Xing Teng thought for a moment and said, Young master, the origin of this treasure is quite strange. It should not belong to that bastard. According to my speculation, maybe your guess is right. The young man laughed and said, No matter what, Many top figures in the Forbidden City have come to the 3,000 Mountains because of this peerless treasure. It can be said to be a gathering of wind and clouds, attracting the attention of the whole world. But now that this treasure has been obtained by us, their efforts are destined to be in vain. Xing Tung frowned and reminded, "Young master, please be careful with your words. This matter must not be publicized, or it will be coveted by others." The young man nodded repeatedly. Yes, Elder Xing Tung is right. After a pause, his eyes suddenly flashed a touch of coldness. He glanced at the powerful followers around him and said, "Did you hear what Elder Xing Tung said? From today on, no one is allowed to mention this matter again. If this matter is leaked, don't blame me for being ruthless." Those followers hurriedly promised. Before long, a mighty long river appeared in their sight. "Young master, it's getting late. Why don't we rest here and continue our journey tomorrow?" Xing Tung suddenly said. "Okay." The young man pondered for a moment before agreeing. Among their group, Xing Tung had the highest cultivation base, possessing C of Soul Realm battle power. However, he had suffered quite a bit of injuries. Since he requested to rest, they naturally couldn't neglect him. "Young master, there seems to be someone over there." At this time, a follower said and pointed to the opposite bank of the river. In the distance, they could see a bonfire burning. Immediately, the young man and others became nervous. In the 3,000 Mountains, those who dared to walk in it were absolutely not ordinary people. What was more, many top figures had come for the peerless treasure. If they encountered one of them, the situation would be a little bad. Don't panic, everyone. It's just a young man on the 4th level of martial realm. Xing Tung glanced around and instantly found some clues, saying carelessly, "Oh, let's go and have a look." The young man suddenly felt relaxed and led the others to cross the river with lightness skill. As Xing Tung said, it was a young man about 13 or 14 years old, dressed in old coarse linen clothes. Although he looked clean and tidy, he looked too shabby in the eyes of the young man and others. This young man, of course, was Lin's son. Just now, he also noticed that someone was approaching. Now seeing such a group of people approaching, he couldn't help but be secretly surprised. If he didn't see it wrong, almost all of these people had the cultivation of gang spirit realm, and they were surrounded by wisps of gang spirit chi. It was absolutely true. Even the spirit revealed by the gray-clothed old man was more horrible. Lin's son had to be vigilant when such a group of people appeared in the wilderness. Oh, it seems that he is a little native living in the 3,000 Mountains. The young man glanced at Lin's son, smiled frivolously, and waved his hand disdainfully. "Little guy, we all have a rest here. If you don't mind, you can leave now. I'm in a good mood today, so I won't embarrass you." The group of followers burst into laughter. The gray-clothed old man frowned, and finally didn't say anything more. A young man didn't deserve too much attention. Thank you, everyone." Lin Sun stammered with a look of awe and trepidation. Then he led the scaly horse and ran away. Looking at Lin Sun's frightened look, the young man and his followers couldn't help laughing again. Sure enough, he is a little bumpkin who has never seen the world. Child's light words scared him away. "Ha ha!" A follower flattered, which made the young man couldn't help laughing and said, "This little bumpkin is smart. He knows that if he doesn't leave, he will definitely suffer some hardships. But he is too cowardly and spineless." "Child, you're wrong. No matter how spineless this little bumpkin is, he can only retreat with his tail between his legs when he sees you." The followers flattered like a tide, making the young man laugh again and again. Only Xing Tung frowned, but he couldn't do anything about it. His child was the eldest son of Lu Wujuan, the governor of the southwestern province of the empire. His status was noble, but his temperament was so domineering that even Xing Tung dared not say anything. They didn't notice that in a place dozens of miles away, Lin Sun, who was running in a panic, suddenly stopped and climbed a big tree. His eyes were like cold stars, looking at the bank of the river in the distance. At this time, there was no trace of fear on Lin Sun's face. He became calm and indifferent, holding a huge white bone bough in his hand. Just now, Lin Sun was humiliated and driven away. Although he seemed to retreat, He was actually very angry in his heart. But he had no choice. Compared with those people, his current cultivation was really not good enough. If he fought recklessly, it would be like hitting a stone with an egg, and he would die in vain. I really don't want to give up, Lin Sun murmured. He knew that even if he waited here, he couldn't find a chance to teach those people a lesson. But he was extremely unwilling to swallow his anger and leave. At this time, the sky and the earth suddenly shook in the distance. At the same time, a golden light rushed up from a very far place, piercing the darkness and extremely dazzling. That was the towering beast claw that he had seen before. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed at once, and then a strange smile appeared on his lips. The place where the towering beast claw appeared seemed to be the riverside just now. Those guys were going to be out of luck. Lin Sun almost laughed out. It was really God who opened his eyes. He suddenly jumped down from the tree and approached there like a gust of wind. Lin Sun wanted to see whether those guys would be in trouble or not. At the same time, he was really curious about what kind of horrible beast the towering beast claw belonged to. Soon, Lin Sun stopped and looked shocked. In his field of vision, he finally saw a huge golden beast, like a mountain, galloping under the night sky. Its whole body was shining with golden light, illuminating the whole world. Chapter 53. The golden light was like fire, illuminating the world. The giant beast was as huge as a mountain. It galloped in the air like a fierce beast from ancient times. It could cover the sun and the moon and break mountains and rivers with its roar. Although it was far away, Lin Sun still felt a stinging pain in his eyes. He trembled all over, and his soul was inexplicably oppressed. It could be vaguely seen that the giant beast was like a deer or a horse. Its head was like a dragon's head, and its tail was like a rainbow. Its whole body was covered with golden fur, and its four hooves were stepping on blazing light. It galloped in the air with overflowing golden light and billions of divine flames. It roared and poured down, burning the mountain and turning the ancient forest into ashes. It was extremely terrible. Its opponent, holding a spear, kept waving it and emitting terrible spear shadows and cold light. Obviously, he couldn't bear it and was suppressed to dodge. Lin Sun judged in an instant that it was the gray-robed old man and the group of people who were fighting against the giant beast just now. It was them. Lin Sun's smile was weird. It was absolutely a lie to say that he was not gloating. But when he saw the power of the old man in gray fighting in the air, Lin Sun couldn't help but be surprised. This was another sea spirit realm existence. Together with the man in green robe, Shai Yutong, the barbarian, and Shi Xuan, the young master of Keystone business, this was the fourth sea spirit realm existence Lin Sun had seen. It could be imagined how many top figures were attracted to the 3,000 mountains for the so-called peerless treasure. But these had nothing to do with Lin Sun. Compared with the sea spirit realm, his cultivation was still not good enough, and he couldn't get involved in this storm at all. Soon, Lin Sun's eyes were attracted by the golden beast. He secretly speculated that the golden beast claw he saw at noon was caused by the old man and his companions. But what on earth did they do to make this giant beast so furious? Boom! The earth shook, and the light rain splashed like falling meteors, smashing the earth, burning the ancient forest, destroying the mountains, and scorching the earth inch by inch. This scene was too terrifying, and once one was affected by it, one was bound to die without a doubt. Lin Sun didn't dare to stay any longer, so he turned around and left. After confirming that the old man and his companions were really in trouble, his anger had been released. If he didn't leave now, he would be risking his life. Bang! However, when Lin Sun ran for less than 1 mile, he heard a rapid sound of something breaking through the air, and then a sound of a heavy object hitting the ground came from the forest not far away. Then, a series of painful moans were heard. Lin Sun was startled. This voice was so familiar. He carefully approached and saw a badly mutilated figure lying on the ground, covered in blood, looking extremely miserable. Even so, Lin Sun could still tell from his clothes that he was the young child of that group of people. Lin Sun was overjoyed. God seemed to favor him today. Not only did he send a giant beast to trample on those people to avenge him, but he also sent the culprit to him. Of course, Lin Sun knew that he was just imagining things. He turned around and saw that the battle in the distance was still ongoing. If Lin Sun guessed right, the young child was thrown out of the battlefield by the gray-robed old man, in case the young child, who seemed to be of extremely noble status, was killed. Unfortunately, this fellow had landed right in front of him. "Child, we meet again." Lin Sun walked forward with a smile. At this moment, the young man was dying and seriously injured. Even with the cultivation of Gang Spirit Realm, he was no different from a disabled person. "You..." The young man gasped and opened his bloody eyes. When he saw Lin Sun clearly, he immediately shouted, "Little native, take me away from here. When I'm safe, I promise you will enjoy endless glory and wealth in the future." His voice was rapid and hoarse. In the end, he even coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood, looking extremely miserable. "Child, I don't want glory and wealth." Lin Sun shook his head and still said with a smile, "I'm already very satisfied to see you like this. Goodbye." Saying this, he turned around and left. "Wait a minute," the young child cried. "Little brother, what do you want to promise to help me once? Tell me, and I'll promise you everything." Lin Sun turned around and looked at the young child's eager eyes. He sighed and said, "Child Lu, you occupied the magpie's nest with poison and drove me away. It's already very benevolent of me not to kill you now. Do you want to push your luck?" Lu Yukuin cried, "Little brother, it's all my fault just now. I apologize to you. I only ask you to be magnanimous and save me once." There was a hint of pleading in his voice, but at the end of his words, he suddenly coughed violently and trembled all over. Suddenly, he collapsed to the ground, and his breath became extremely weak. Lin Sun pondered for a moment and stepped forward, saying, "Well, there's no great hatred between us. It's okay to save you once." He squatted down and reached out to help Lu Yukuin up. Whoosh! At this moment, Lu Yukuin's eyes suddenly flashed with a touch of ruthlessness and coldness. His originally weak body suddenly stood up. At the same time, he shook his arm and clasped Lin Sun's neck. A dagger appeared in his hand and was pressed against Lin Sun's throat. Lu Yukuin laughed grimly. "Little bastard, be obedient, or else this sword will take your life." Lin Sun didn't move, but there was no trace of panic on his face. Instead, he laughed. "Sure enough, I knew people like you wouldn't have good intentions, even if you asked for help." Lu Yukuin said coldly. "What do you mean?" Bang! At this moment, the muscles of Lin Sun's shoulder blade suddenly expanded, releasing a huge shock force. In an instant, Lu Yukuin's arm around his neck was shaken away. At the same time, he tilted his head back and twisted his wrist in a strange way. He clasped Lu Yukuin's arm tightly and twisted it violently. With a crack, Lu Yukuin's arm was dislocated and his joints were dislocated. The dagger in his hand suddenly lost its strength and fell to the ground. With a snap, Lin Sun turned over and slapped Lu Yukuin in the face, causing him to howl miserably and lose several teeth. How could it be? Lu Yukuin was horrified. How could he have expected that Lin Sun, who had been subdued by him, would turn defeat into victory in just a moment? All this was due to Lin Sun's practice of separating tendons and dislocating bones from Shia solstice. In the case of close combat, this kind of skill in using physical strength was absolutely incredible and impossible to guard against. Unfortunately, Lu Yukuin only regarded Lin Sun as a practitioner on the 4th level of martial realm. He had been guarding against Lin Sun's use of spiritual energy, but neglected Lin Sun's terrible physical strength. "Child Lu, I saved you out of kindness. Is this how you treat me?" Lin Sun sighed and picked up the dagger. Without any hesitation, he pierced Lu Yukuin's throat with one blow, and blood burst out. Looking at the shock, resentment, and unwillingness in Lu Yukuin's eyes, Lin Sun smiled and said, "Child Lu, although the little native is inconspicuous, he has a clear distinction between love and hate. Once he has the chance, he will not hesitate to kill a scum like you. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself, can't you?" Lu Yukuan's lips made a sound, and finally fell to the ground and died unwillingly. Lin Sun put away his smile and looked back at the distance. Seeing that the battle there had already ended, Lin Sun was shocked. He quickly searched Lu Yukuan's body, but only found a purple jade belt that he was wearing. It should be a storage spiritual weapon. Lin Sun didn't look at it and hurried away. Not long after, the scaly horse galloped, carrying Lin Sun's figure to the distance in the night, and soon disappeared. He had to leave as soon as possible. Lin Sun was very clear that Lu Yukuan's identity was absolutely not simple, since he was followed by a sea spirit realm practitioner as a guard. Once such a child with a strong background died, it would inevitably cause a lot of trouble. Roar! Lin Sun, riding on the scaly horse, was running wildly. Suddenly, he heard an earth-shaking roar coming from a distance. The scaly horse was so frightened that it whined and became restless. Turning his head, Lin Sun saw a huge golden fierce beast roaring in the distant sky, its voice full of anger. Endless flames poured down like a rainbow from the sky, burning the world as if it had turned into a fiery hell. It was terrible. Lin Sun felt lucky in his heart. If he had left a little later and stayed in front of Lu Yukuan's body, he would have been doomed to be affected and die. But Lin Sun couldn't judge whether the gray-clothed old man and his group had died in the battle. Anyway, I must leave this place as soon as possible. Lin Sun took a deep breath and urged the restless, scaly horse to continue running wildly. Golden Flame Beast. It's this beast. Could be. How many years has it been? Who would have thought that there was a golden flame beast hidden in the 3,000 mountains? This is a strange beast with a trace of blood relationship with the ancient divine beast, Fire Kylan. It's really not simple. I underestimated the 3,000 mountains before. It's the first time that I've found traces of this beast in nearly 1,000 years. Let's go and have a look. Maybe the appearance of this beast has something to do with the peerless treasure. At the same time, in different areas of the 3,000 mountains, the shocking roar of the golden flame beast also attracted the attention of many top practitioners who came to look for the peerless treasure. For example, Shai Yutong, the 9th young master of the Xie family, Shi Xuan, the 1st young master of Keystone Business, and so on. This night was doomed to not be peaceful. It was the same for Lin Sun and those practitioners who gathered in the 3,000 mountains because of the rumor of a peerless treasure. But Lin Sun didn't know that it didn't take long for Lu Yukuan's charred body to be found, which caused a great disturbance. This was the eldest son of Lu Wujuan, the governor of the southwestern province of the empire. Who was Lu Wujuan? He was a well-known, strong practitioner of Tao Insight realm in the empire, and he was also famous in the cultivation world of the empire. Lu Wujuan was a brave and iron-blooded soldier. He had been in charge of the southwestern province of the empire for nearly 50 years. He was famous and powerful. Lu Yukuan died in the 3,000 mountains. As his father, how could Lu Wujuan let it go? Chapter 54. When dawn was about to break, the scaly horse couldn't bear it anymore after running all night. It staggered and collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. Lin Sun turned over and landed on the ground steadily. Looking at the sweaty, scaly horse, he couldn't help but feel a little ashamed. He was so sorry that he had exhausted the horse while he was running. "Brother horse, I'm sorry." Lin Sun took out some spiritual materials and gave them to the scaly horse. Seeing the horse chewing happily, Lin Sun smiled slightly. The scaly horse was a kind of fierce beast, but once it was tamed, its temperament would become extremely docile. Lin Sun couldn't live without the scaly horse when running between Green Sun Tribe and Feiyun Village in the future. Lin Sun also found a place to rest. He took out the spirit refining liquid and gulped it down. Then he took out the purple jade belt peeled from Lu Yukuan. This was a precious spiritual storage device. The belt was not only engraved with exquisite and dense spiritual tattoos, but also inlaid with fine pearls and jades. It was extraordinarily luxurious. However, in Lin Sun's view, these decorations were too flashy. If it were him, he would never make a spiritual storage device so dazzling, for it would only attract thieves' attention. He opened the purple jade belt, and the storage space inside suddenly appeared. To Lin Sun's surprise, there was only a bronze chest of 1 square foot in such a large space. Apart from that, there was nothing else. Slightly disappointed, Lin Sun couldn't help but look at the bronze chest. The box showed a kind of antique color accumulated over the years. The 4 corners of the box were engraved with 4 patterns: cloud pattern, landscape pattern, exotic beast, sun, and moon. Around the box, there were mysterious spiritual patterns, which released an obscure and palpitating aura. This seems to be a kind of spiritual tattoo formation specially used for sealing. Lin Sun's black eyes flashed with a touch of surprise. Based on his knowledge of spiritual tattoos, although he couldn't judge the name of those spiritual tattoos, he could roughly tell from its breadth that it should be a kind of sealing power. Only spiritual tattooists could inscribe a spiritual tattoo formation. Who would spend so much effort to inscribe a spiritual tattoo formation specially used for sealing on a bronze chest? This price was too high. However, it could be determined from this that this bronze chest was definitely made to seal some extremely precious treasures. Thinking of this, Lin Sun's heart shook. At first glance, he knew that Liu Yuquan's identity was not simple. They were chased by the golden beast tonight. Was it because of the things sealed in the bronze chest that caused all this to happen? What was hidden in this bronze chest? Lin Sun continued to investigate. After a while, he couldn't help but gasp. There was an extremely terrible spiritual tattoo restriction at the opening of the bronze chest. The so-called spiritual tattoo restriction was a spiritual formation used for sealing. Those who could arrange spiritual tattoo restriction were definitely powerful figures with the title of Spiritual Tattoo Master. A spiritual tattoo grandmaster was a transcendent figure who was even more distinguished than a spiritual tattooist. The bronze box was not only engraved with a special spiritual tattoo formation for sealing, but also engraved with a spiritual tattoo restriction at the opening. The value of this bronze box alone could be regarded as an immeasurable and amazing figure. What on earth was the treasure sealed in the bronze chest at this time? It was a pity that Lin Sun couldn't open it. With the existence of the spiritual tattoo restriction, even a spiritual tattoo master couldn't do anything if he didn't know the real mystery of the spiritual tattoo restriction, let alone him. Well, it won't be too late to open it later when I have a chance. Lin Sun thought for a long time and finally gave up. His current mastery of spiritual tattoos could only be regarded as a little better than other spiritual apprentices, but he couldn't be regarded as a qualified spiritual tattooist, let alone a spiritual tattoo master. The standard of becoming a spiritual tattooist was also very simple. One had to inscribe a spiritual tattoo formation alone. However, it was not so easy to inscribe a spiritual tattoo formation. At least, it was difficult to do this without the cultivation of Gang's spirit realm. The reason lay in the spiritual power and soul power. The spiritual power and soul perception of a practitioner in martial realm were not enough to support the inscribing of a spiritual tattoo formation. Of course, this was in a general sense. There were still some special cases in the world. For example, Lin Sun knew that Master Liu once inadvertently mentioned after getting drunk that when he was on the 8th level of martial realm, he could skillfully inscribe a complete spiritual tattoo formation and became one of the youngest spiritual tattooists at that time. Since Master Liu could do it, Lin Sun thought that as long as he worked hard, he could also do it. Putting aside his messy thoughts, Lin Sun took out the bronze chest. Boom! To his surprise, the bronze chest was extremely heavy, at least 5,000 kilograms of force. As soon as it was taken out, it smashed a hole in the ground. But the more it was like this, the more Lin Sun concluded that there must be some great treasure sealed in the chest. Without hesitation, he moved the bronze chest into his storage ring and let out a long sigh of relief. After resting for 2 hours, the scaly horse had recovered its strength. Lin Sun identified the direction and set off again. There were no more dangerous storms along the way. When he passed by a crater, Lin Sun deliberately stopped and threw the purple jade belt into the boiling lava. Lin Sun would not carry this thing with him. He didn't even touch the jewels inlaid on the belt. This was to prevent any future troubles. Precious as this thing was, it was Liu Yuquan's personal belongings after all. It was hard to guarantee that there was no unique breath left on it. If it was found by the power behind Liu Yuquan, there would be endless troubles. Sunset Plain. This was a plain distributed among the 3,000 mountains, surrounded by mountains on three sides. To the north, it led to Donglin Town on the southwest border of Xiao Empire. A river flowed down along the mountain range, winding around the plain like a jade belt and irrigating a plentiful spiritual field. Green Sun Tribe was located on this sunset plain. Tracing back to history, Green Sun Tribe was originally a barbarian tribe in the mountains. But with the expansion of Xiao Empire, Green Sun Tribe gradually integrated into the territory of the empire. Until now, it was rare to see real barbarian descendants of Green Sun Tribe. Although it was called a tribe, it was now like a bustling town, a pivotal fortress between Xiao Empire, Donglin Town, and the 3,000 mountains. Most of the goods, such as fur, bones, spiritual herbs, and spiritual materials produced in the 3,000 mountains would be gathered in Green Sun Tribe and then flowed into Donglin Town. Similarly, because of the special geographical location, many chambers of commerce from all over the empire and practitioners who ventured to the 3,000 mountains would also choose Green Sun Tribe as a foothold. It was for this reason that the prosperity of Green Sun Tribe today was forged. It was 10 o'clock in the evening, and the sunset glow was like fire. A scaly horse came to the front of Green Sun Tribe with dust. In order to resist the attacks of the fierce beasts in the mountains, the Green Sun Tribe had built thick and tall city walls around it. The north and south walls each had a gate for pedestrians to pass through. As the scaly horse approached, the guard stationed on both sides of the gate saw clearly that it was a 13 or 14-year-old boy in gray riding on the horse, carrying an animal skin bag as tall as a man. 3 copper coins are required to enter the city. A guard came forward and said, "Okay." Lin Sun dismounted from the horse, took out 3 copper coins with a smile, and handed them over. The guard nodded and waved his hand to let Lin Sun pass. There was no strict order in the Green Sun Tribe. Just like a temporary place to settle down, new faces appeared and old faces disappeared every day. No one would be willing to stay here for the rest of their lives. After all, compared with the prosperity of Xiao Empire, the Green Sun Tribe in the 3,000 mountains was still far behind. It was too backward and dangerous, and it had to guard against the attacks of fierce beasts in the mountains at all times. Soon, Lin Sun led the scaly horse into the gate and disappeared in the crowded street. "Go and tell the shopkeeper of Wu Business that the Mount of Lien Rufeng from Feiyun Village has appeared. Tell him everything you saw just now." Watching Lin Sun leave, the guard who had been collecting the copper coins suddenly waved his hand to summon a black-clothed man with a protruding mouth and ape-like cheeks and whispered to him, "Okay." The black-clothed man nodded, turned around, and hurried away. Wu Business has been waiting for so many days, but only a young man came. It seems that if they want to know the news of Wu Henshui, they have to start with this young man. The guard thought for a while and then shook his head. These things had nothing to do with him. He was only responsible for delivering some news. Lin Sun didn't know that he had been secretly watched as soon as he entered the city gate. At this time, he was walking along a spacious street in the bustling crowd. There were many people, and it was very lively. Strong laborers in animal skins were carrying bags of goods. Some peddlers and pawns were peddling some mountain specialties on both sides of the street, including spiritual herbs, animal skins, and ores. From time to time, merchants in brocade clothes could be seen running wildly in the street in their carriages. There were also practitioners carrying weapons on their backs, hurrying through the crowd. On both sides of the street, there were rows of stone houses, restaurants, medicine shops, weapon shops, inns, chambers of commerce, and brothels. As the saying goes, small as a sparrow it has all the vital organs. Although the Green Sun Tribe was not large, it was lively. All kinds of people shuttled back and forth, forming a bustling scene. It was the first time for Lin Sun to enter a bustling area where people gathered in his life. His emotions were somewhat complicated, including excitement, curiosity, and admiration. Growing up in the mine prison, Lin Sun's first place in Xiao Empire was the poor and remote Feiyun village. No matter how shrewd Lin Sun was, he was only a 13-year-old boy after all. In the face of such prosperity, he could not help but be in a trance. Just the Green Sun tribe alone was so lively and prosperous. If he really entered the city of Xiao Empire, how prosperous would it be? Chapter 55. Walking along the street, Lin Sun also found that many eyes were looking at him along the way, and some of them had a trace of greed that couldn't be concealed. Lin Sun was clear that the huge hide bag on his horse was indeed too eye-catching. If it were an experienced veteran, he would be able to tell what was hidden in it by just looking at it. Just by sniffing it, he would know the quality of the goods and how much they were worth. Plus, he was alone with a horse, so he naturally couldn't stop some people from peeping. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the crowd in the distance, attracting many onlookers. When Lin Sun arrived, he saw a man in animal skin had no time to dodge, and his head was cut off by a practitioner with a saber. Blood splashed out, which was extremely horrifying. Seeing this, the onlookers not only didn't panic, but also cheered loudly, as if they were watching a good show. "How dare you steal from me? You're courting death." Bah! The practitioner put away his saber, glanced at the body on the ground, and swaggered away. This was murder in the street, but no one stopped him. Obviously, people here had long been used to this kind of thing. Before long, two figures dressed as guards hurriedly cleaned up the headless body and took it away. In just a moment, the street returned to its previous liveliness, as if the murder had not happened at all. Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but squint. He had roughly seen that there were no rules in the Green Sun tribe at all. To establish a foothold here, a strong force was an indispensable condition. Not long after, Lin Sun saw two groups of people fighting in the street, seemingly for a batch of goods, but they were soon stopped by a passing practitioner. The way he stopped them was also very rough. He directly killed two people, and the fact that he used blood to frighten the crowd, instantly resolving the dispute. Under the prosperity, there must be a dirty undercurrent. Lin Sun suddenly remembered the words of a prisoner imprisoned in the mine prison. At that time, he was still young and didn't understand the meaning of these words. But now walking in the Green Sun tribe, looking at the greedy eyes hidden under the prosperous atmosphere, Lin Sun instantly understood the meaning of this sentence. But Lin Sun was not afraid. Along the way, he had roughly judged that compared with those ordinary people, the number of practitioners was obviously very small, and most of them were in the martial realm. Few practitioners in the gang spirit realm could be seen. If someone dared to covet his goods, Lin Sun wouldn't mind giving him an unforgettable lesson. Unfortunately, Lin seemed to be lucky today. Even though he noticed many greedy eyes along the way, no one came out to make trouble. The sky darkened and night fell. Lin Sun stopped in front of a building called Old Crow Inn. He threw 2 copper coins to the waiter and asked him to take care of the scaly horse. Lin Sun himself entered the inn. He planned to go to Keystone Business to exchange materials tomorrow morning. There were many tables set up on the first floor of the inn, and it seemed to be extremely bustling at this moment. Many figures sat there eating, drinking, and chatting loudly, causing it to seem rather noisy. The boss was a huge one-eyed man with a rather ferocious face. At this time, he was drinking lazily. When they saw Lin Sun walk in, the eyes of many people in the inn lit up, and they all fell on the huge animal skin bag that was as tall as a man in Lin Sun's hand. When they saw Lin Sun's face clearly, there was undisguised greed in many people's eyes. But there were also some people who withdrew their eyes sensibly. It was very eye-catching that a 13-year-old boy dared to appear here alone with an animal skin bag weighing hundreds of kilograms. As long as they were not stupid, they would know that this boy should be a ruthless character. "Stay in the inn?" The huge one-eyed man sitting behind the counter asked absent-mindedly. "Stay in the inn?" Lin Sun smiled and nodded. 20 copper coins a night. The huge one-eyed man glanced at Lin Sun. As soon as his voice fell, many people burst into laughter. "One-eyed, are you ripping off customers again? Don't you know how you lost your eye?" The huge one-eyed man ignored the laughter and just looked at Lin Sun without explaining anything from beginning to end. Okay. Lin Sun took out 20 copper coins and handed them over. Where's the room? It's yours tonight. The huge one-eyed man raised his hand and pointed to the corner of the second floor. Then he took the flagon and drank lazily. Lin Sun smiled. Thank you. He turned around and walked upstairs with the animal skin bag. Watching Lin Sun's figure walking into the room, a drunk fat man suddenly came to the counter and said, "This is a rare little fat sheep. He has enough goods, at least this amount." As he said, he stretched out 4 fingers and gestured in front of the huge one-eyed man. The huge one-eyed man seemed to be unaware of this and continued to drink. After a long time, he squinted at the fat man and said, "Fatty Shio, you have been in the Green Sun tribe for almost 6 years, haven't you? Do you plan to stay here for the rest of your life?" Shio's face suddenly changed. "What do you mean?" The huge one-eyed man sighed and said, "Listen to me, don't worry about it. That boy is not to be trifled with." After thinking for a while, he added, "No, he's not to be trifled with." Shio's expression changed. After a long time, he said with a wry smile, "I see." He turned around and left. The huge one-eyed man squinted and watched Shio walk out of the inn. He had said what he wanted to say. As for whether the fat man understood, it was none of his business. The huge one-eyed man picked up his cup and looked at the ripples on the amber wine, murmuring, "It's not peaceful recently." At the same time in the Wu business. As one of the leading businesses in the Green Sun tribe, the Wu business was rich and powerful. Its boss was said to be a big shot in the Donglin town of the empire. In the darkness of the night, the hall of the backyard of the Wu business was brightly lit. Wu Daong sat in the main seat with a gloomy face and said nothing. He was sent to the Green Sun tribe to take charge of the operation of the Wu business. He was about 40 years old, in the prime of his life. As a member of the clan of Wu in the Donglin town, he had reached the 7th level of the martial realm and was a well-known figure in the Green Sun tribe. Below Wu Daong sat a group of stewards of the business. At this moment, they all looked silent and did not dare to make sound. So far, it has been more than 3 days since the deadline agreed with the great deacon Wu Henshui. So far, no news has been sent back. What do you think of this matter? Wu Daong said in a low voice, breaking the dead silence in the hall. It's more than 2,000 miles from Feiyun village. The great deacon may have been delayed by something on the way. Someone said cautiously, "Humph. Even if something happened, with the great deacon's meticulous mind, he would certainly send a subordinate back to deliver the news. But now there is no news. Do you think it's normal?" Wu Daong frowned and said coldly, "Shopkeeper, do you think that the great deacon has met with some mishap?" Someone couldn't help asking. Wu Daong was silent, his face as gloomy as water. Obviously, that was what he thought. At this time, a servant hurried into the hall and said, "Manager, there is news from the gate guards that a young man riding Lien Roofing's scaly horse has entered the Green Sun tribe in the evening." Hearing this, Wu Daong's eyes lit up. He remembered Lien Rufeng, the leader of the guards from Feiyun village. "Where's the young man now?" Wu Daong asked. According to the spy, the young man has been living in the Old Crow Inn. The servant answered quickly, "Something is wrong. If the young man was sent back by the great deacon to deliver the news, he should have come to our Wu business immediately. But now he has gone to the Old Crow Inn. Obviously something is wrong." A man in the hall frowned and said. Wu Daong's eyes flashed. After a moment of thinking, he waved his hand and said, "Send some people to the Old Crow Inn. By any means, bring the young man back to me." The servant immediately took the order and left. Wu Daong thought for a moment, and then he changed the topic and said to everyone present, "Everyone, the 3,000 mountains have been rather restless lately. Many top great figures from the empire have gathered here for the sake of a peerless treasure. During this period of time, all of you must be careful and not give any clues. Otherwise, even I won't be able to save all of you if something happens." Everyone nodded solemnly. Of course, they were also aware of this matter. In recent days, many strange faces had come to the Green Sun tribe, including some extremely powerful nobles. Under such circumstances, the local bullies like them had to keep a low profile. "Well, you can go now. When a young man is brought back and everything is clear, I will tell you. Wu Deong waved his hand. Things had been made clear, so there was no need to mobilize the people. Most importantly, in Wu Deong's view, a teenager from Feiyun village could be easily brought back by a few people without any accidents. In the room on the second floor of the Old Crow Inn, as soon as Lin Sun walked in, he looked around the room and found nothing wrong. Then he threw the animal skin bag in his hand into the storage ring. When he was outside, he had to expose the animal skin bag in order to cover up his spiritual storage device. But now that there was no one around, there was no need to do so. All he had to do was wait until he left the inn to take out the bee skin pouch. I rode Lien Roofing's scaly horse into the Green Sun tribe. I don't know whether Wu Business found out or not. But no matter what, this problem has to be solved sooner or later. Lin Sun crossed his legs and lay lazily on the bed, lost in thought. He knew that because of Wu Hinshui's death, Wu Business would never let it go. Instead of passively letting them find trouble in Feiyun village, it was better to settle the matter in the Green Sun tribe. This was also the reason why Lin Sun swaggered into the Green Sun tribe on Lien Roofing's scaly horse. He wanted to attract Wu Business's attention. Although it was dangerous, Lin Sun already had a plan in mind, so he was not nervous. Chapter 56. When the 4 or 5 people entered the Old Crow Inn, the one-eyed bruiser, sitting behind the counter, narrowed his eyes and looked at the leading young man, with an imperceptible resentment flashing across his face. The leading young man was thin and vigorous, with long and narrow eyes. Dressed in a leather robe, he exuded an unruly aura. "Wu Jia, what are you doing here?" the one-eyed bruiser asked in a low voice. At this moment, the noisy atmosphere in the hall was gone. The diners and drunkards all looked unnatural, as if they were quite afraid of the young man named Wu Jia. In the Green Sun tribe, the nickname Mad Dog Wu Jia was quite well known. Backed by the Wu Business, he was cruel and bloodthirsty. Over the years, at least hundreds of people had died in his hands, and he had offended countless people. But because of the Wu Business, he was still free and unfettered. For example, the other eye of the one-eyed bruiser, the owner of the Old Crow Inn, was gouged out by Wu Jia with his fingers 2 years ago. Wu Jia grinned and said, "Old one-eyed, you'd better sit down. I'm here to take someone away." Then he turned to ask a man beside him, "Which room is the boy in?" "The southwest corner of the second floor." "Let's go." With his hands behind his back, Wu Jia leisurely walked to the second floor. Watching them swagger past him, the one-eyed bruiser's face was also changing, but in the end, he held back and said nothing. Immediately, the one-eyed bruiser seemed to realize something. He suddenly looked up, and the image of a handsome and warm young man quietly emerged in his mind. It seems that the young man is really not simple. But this time, he has offended Mad Dog Wu Jia. I'm afraid he's doomed. The one-eyed bruiser drank a glass of wine and sighed in his heart. Mad Dog Wu Jia, with the cultivation of the 4th level of martial realm, was not the top in the Green Sun tribe, but he had the backing of Wu Business. What's more, those he killed were all ordinary people, so he did not offend those powerful figures. So far, no one could do anything to him. The diners in the hall on the first floor also realized that Mad Dog Wu Jia seemed to want to deal with a young man with an unfamiliar face, and they couldn't help but start discussing. In my opinion, it's the first time that strange young man has entered the Green Sun tribe. Look at the huge bag in his hand. It's obvious that it's rich. It's a pity that he's targeted by this notorious mad dog. There's no chance for him to survive. Pity? Are you drooling? Earlier, I saw that you've been thinking about that little fat sheep, and we're looking for an opportunity to make a move. Humph. Don't talk about me. Look at the others in this hall. Which one of them isn't thinking about this little fat sheep? The crowd had different expressions on their faces. Some of them were more or less regretful, not because they sympathized with Lin Sun, but because Lin Sun, the little fat sheep, was about to be eaten by a mad dog. Amidst the discussion, the door on the southwest corner of the second floor was opened. Wu Jia and the others walked in and closed the door again, making it impossible to see what was happening inside. "Fatty Xiao, why are you back?" The one-eyed bruiser glanced at Fatty Xiao, who had left before, and saw that he had returned with 4 people. When he saw the appearance of the 4 people behind Fatty Xiao, the one-eyed bruiser couldn't help but feel strange. These 4 people were all ruthless characters in the Green Sun tribe. But compared with Mad Dog Wu Jie, these 4 people were still far behind. Fatty Xiao smirked and said in a low voice, "I've been thinking about it for a long time. I'm not willing to watch a fat sheep without being able to take a bite. So, I invited some friends to join me." The one-eyed bruiser sneered, "You're too late. The little fat sheep has already been taken." Fatty Zhao's face changed. Who the hell is so wicked? The one-eyed bruiser was about to say something when he heard a loud bang. The door on the southwest corner of the second floor opened, and a black shadow was thrown out and smashed on a table on the first floor. Wine glasses, plates, jugs, and the table were all broken. Several drunkards who were drinking at the table were so shocked that they staggered back and almost fell to the ground. Many screams rang out, and the scene suddenly became chaotic. The figure that was thrown down was one of Mad Dog Wu Jie's subordinates, but at this moment his neck had been twisted and he had turned into a corpse lying on the ground. His eyes were still wide open, and there was still a trace of fear written on them. Seeing this scene, all the people present fell silent. It was Wu Jie's man. Fatty Zhao's expression suddenly changed. He finally knew who had attacked the little sheep before him. However, he never expected that the dead body that was thrown down the building was not the little sheep. The one-eyed bruiser's face also changed, and he couldn't help looking at the room in the southwest corner of the second floor. Bang! Almost at the same time, another dead body was thrown down the stairs. It was also Wu Jie's man, which caused another uproar in the room. Everyone's face changed. The way this dead body died was even more frightening. Its arms were twisted like fried dough twists, and its chest had collapsed as if it had been trampled by a bull. Its face was extremely miserable. Fatty Zhao's cheeks twitched fiercely, and he gasped. He finally realized that the one-eyed bruiser's previous warning was right. The boy was not a little fat sheep, but a fierce wolf in sheep's clothing. Wu Jie is also up there. Fatty Xiao couldn't help but ask. The one-eyed bruiser nodded. He was also quite shocked. It was unusual that 2 of his men had been killed by Wu Jie in a row. Bang! Bang! Soon, another body was thrown down. This time, there were 2 bodies. One had its head split open, and blood and brain matter gushed out. The other had its throat cut open, and blood flowed out and soon gathered into a pool of blood on the ground. At this time, the diners and drunkards were all frightened by the tragic and bloody scene in front of them. Some of the greed in their hearts disappeared without a trace. It was too horrifying. From beginning to end, there was no sound of fighting. The 4 men brought by Mad Dog Wu Jie were turned into dead bodies and thrown down one after another. This was not something an ordinary person could do. However, even though they were shocked, no one left. They all looked up at the room in the southwest corner of the second floor, as if waiting for something. The one-eyed bruiser was no exception. Now, there were only Mad Dog Wu Jie and the strange boy left in the room. Who would be the loser of this battle? As for Fatty Xiao and the others, they had long been scared out of their wits. They rejoiced in their hearts that Mad Dog Wu Jie had taken action in advance. If it had been them, they would have become corpses on the ground now. No more dead bodies were thrown out. Just when everyone was waiting anxiously, they saw the figure of a boy coming out of the room. He wore coarse, gray linen clothes, and his long hair was casually tied behind his head, revealing a handsome and warm face. His black eyes were clear, his nose was straight, and there was a trace of youthfulness between his brows. There was still a trace of a smile hanging on the corners of his mouth. Coupled with his thin figure, he seemed harmless. He carried a huge animal skin bag on his back and a bloody package in his hand. Drops of dark red blood oozed from the surface and dripped on the ground, which looked extremely horrifying. Needless to say, this boy was Lin Sun, and there must be a head in the package in his hand. Seeing such a scene, the atmosphere became even more deathly silent. Only the sound of Lin Sun's unhurried footsteps could be heard. The one-eyed bruiser's hand trembled, and the wine in his hand spilled. He didn't know it because his heart had been overwhelmed by deep shock. Although he had long seen that Lin Sun was not an ordinary person, he still did not expect that Mad Dog Wu Jie would also die in Lin Sun's hands. Fatty Xiao and the others, as well as the diners present, were also stunned, with undisguised fear in their eyes. There were many fierce characters in the Green Sun tribe. If they were not strong, there was no way they could survive in this unruly place. Because of this, when they saw Lin Sun kill Mad Dog Wu Jie and his men in such a short time, everyone present realized that there was another fierce man in the Green Sun tribe today, and he was not just any ordinary fierce. "Boss, that room has to be checked out." Lin Sun came to the counter and said with a helpless smile. The one-eyed bruiser trembled all over. He immediately took out 20 copper coins and handed them over. "This is the room fee." Lin Sun took 15 copper coins and left the remaining 5 to the one-eyed bruiser. "There was some accident today, and a lot of things in the inn were destroyed. Take the money from the corpses as compensation." Immediately, Lin Sun glanced thoughtfully at Fatty Xiao next to him and reminded him with a smile, "Dude, you wet your pants." Fatty Xiao was stunned and looked down. There was a water stain under his feet, and between his legs was also wet. He couldn't help but feel hot and uncomfortable, wishing he could find a hole to hide in. Lin Sun had already left, and the deathly silence in the hall soon dissipated. At this time, everyone looked at Fatty Xiao's embarrassing situation and couldn't help laughing. Fatty Xiao was scared to wet his pants. The one-eyed bruiser saw all this, but he didn't smile. He knew very well that Mad Dog Wu Jie and his men died here today. It wouldn't be long before the wrath of Wu business was aroused, and the consequences would be very serious. I can only hope that the young man can get out of danger. The one-eyed bruiser sighed in his heart. Lin Sun's killing of Wu Jie was equivalent to indirectly avenging him for gouging out his eyes. Naturally, he didn't want Lin Sun to be harmed by Wu business. But unfortunately, the one-eyed bruiser knew that, according to the influence of Wu business in Green Sun tribe, the young man might not survive tonight. I didn't expect that they would be so impatient to take action in advance tonight. It seems that I have to change my plan and go to Keystone Business at night. Lin Sun led the scaly horse and walked on the street at night, calculating in his heart. Killing Mad Dog Wu Jie meant that all the hatred was concentrated on him, but this was exactly what Lin Sun wanted to see. Since Wu Henshui disregarded the lives of the villagers of Feiyun Village and wanted to encroach on everything in Feiyun Village, it was destined that this matter would not end well. Lin Sun would not let Wu business vent all their anger on the villagers of Feiyun Village because of Wu Henshui's death. But what Lin Sun didn't expect was that they acted so fast. So Lin Sun had to change his plan temporarily. He knew that the moment he left the Old Crow Inn, the news of Mad Dog Wu Jie's death would inevitably spread to Wu business at the fastest speed. So he must solve this matter tonight, or he would be in danger. Chapter 57. The Green Sun tribe was brightly lit at night. Although it was not as prosperous as the daytime, there were still many pedestrians coming and going on the streets. Keystone Business was located in the central area of the Green Sun tribe, covering an area of more than 10 acres. The 3-story building made of bluestone was magnificent and eye-catching, which stood out among the nearby buildings. When Lin Sun arrived, he found that Keystone Business was not closed. Instead, it was quite lively. Many animal carriages were parked nearby, and many practitioners could be seen going in and out. Lin Sun tied the scaly horse to one side and walked directly into Keystone Business with a huge animal skin bag. Keystone Business was quite magnificent and spacious, with a row of long white stone counters. On both sides were different areas, where spiritual herbs, spiritual materials, weapons, equipment, and other necessities for cultivation were listed. Many attendants shuttled back and forth among the guests, their attitudes refined and courteous, neither servile nor overbearing. There were also some guards scattered around, with sharp eyes and long breaths. They all had the cultivation between the 4th level of Martial Realm and the 6th level of Martial Realm, especially the old man sitting behind the counter in the lobby, whose whole body was faintly overflowing with evil chi. He was actually in Gang Spirit Realm. All of this showed that Keystone Business was extremely powerful and rich in resources. Lin Sun watched all this silently and was amazed in his heart. He didn't know that Keystone Business was a top chamber of commerce, even in Xiao Empire. Nor did he know that the boss behind Keystone Business was a legendary figure known as Fortune Godshire. But from many details, he could see that Keystone Business was indeed incomparable to ordinary chambers of commerce. A waiter came up to him and took him to the exchange area on one side after asking him some questions. This area was relatively quiet, with only a dozen or so figures scattered around. "May I ask what items you want to sell?" A middle-aged man in brocade robe came forward and asked with a smile. He didn't look down on or perfunctory Lin Sun because of his young age, but he wasn't too enthusiastic either. His attitude was neither cold nor hot, and he was well-mannered. "I'd like to meet your shopkeeper," Lin Sun said with a smile. The middle-aged man frowned and said, "Sorry, the shopkeeper has something important to do. I'm afraid he can't come out to meet you at this time." A 13 or 14-year-old boy in coarse linen wanted to see the shopkeeper directly. It was a little arrogant. Did he think that as the shopkeeper of Keystone Business, he could see the shopkeeper at will? "Oh, it's okay, I can wait," Lin Sun said casually, as if he didn't notice the change of the middle-aged man's attitude. The middle-aged man's brows knit together even more tightly, and his attitude became slightly cold and indifferent as he said, "Young master, may I know what rare treasure you possess that you must personally come here with a shopkeeper?" Lin Sun laughed. "Do you think I don't deserve to meet your shopkeeper?" The middle-aged man in embroidered robes said indifferently, "How could I dare? It's just that I know that the items in young master's hands aren't that precious. If you want to sell them, there's absolutely no need for shopkeeper to come here personally." As he said, he pointed at the huge animal skin bag carried by Lin Sun with a little pride and said, "If I'm not mistaken, there should be 31 pieces of beast fur, some bones, sharp claws, and other items in it. In addition, there are dozens of spiritual materials, right?" Lin Sun was surprised and said, "Good eyesight." The middle-aged man in embroidered robes said indifferently, "Young master, in our business, our eyesight and sense of smell are incomparable to ordinary people. Perhaps these items are of high value in your eyes, but in our Keystone Business, these items can only be exchanged for 4,000 copper coins, which can buy an ordinary spiritual weapon at most." After a pause, he continued, "So, young master, have you changed your mind now?" Lin Sun shook his head. "I think it's better for you to inform your shopkeeper. It's not that I don't trust you, but I have something else to discuss with your shopkeeper." The middle-aged man in embroidered robes saw that the boy in front of him was still ignorant after he explained patiently to this extent. He was immediately displeased and snorted coldly, "Young master, goodbye." This was tantamount to driving Lin Sun away. Lin Sun was stunned and said helplessly, "Uncle, I don't know why you are angry, but if you really do this, it will be too ungracious." The middle-aged man in embroidered robes was so angry that he laughed. "You are just a young boy. How dare you say that I am ungracious?" There was a touch of sternness in his voice. Lin Sun said with a smile, "I just think that you can inform your shopkeeper first. If I really come to make trouble, you can drive me out, can't you?" The middle-aged man in embroidered robes was already impatient. He didn't listen to Lin Sun's explanation at all. He waved his hand and said, "Come on, ask this young master to leave." Immediately, 2 practitioners who were guarding nearby came over. Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but feel helpless. He had spoken sincerely enough, but he didn't expect that the middle-aged man didn't even bother to pay attention to his request. Lin Sun sighed, "Uncle, I think you will definitely regret it later." The middle-aged man's face darkened, and he shouted, "Why don't you kick this arrogant boy out?" The 2 practitioners exchanged a look and suddenly stretched out their arms to grab Lin Sun from left and right. Bang! However, although they moved fast, Lin Sun moved faster. He suddenly stepped forward, bent his elbow, and swung his arm. He suddenly clasped the neck of the middle-aged man in embroidered robes, and then shouted, "Whoever dares to move, I will break his neck immediately." The 2 practitioners suddenly hesitated. Being subdued by one blow, the middle-aged man in embroidered robes was not afraid at all. Instead, he roared angrily, "Someone comes to make trouble in our Keystone Business." There was a commotion in the nearby area. Before long, many guards rushed over and surrounded Lin's son. However, because the middle-aged man in embroidered robes was subdued, no one dared to come forward without authorization. "Young man, I advise you to stop. Don't make a mistake." An old man separated the crowd and paced towards them. It was the practitioner of gang spirit realm in the lobby. Lin Sun looked at ease and even laughed. "Do you believe me if I say this is a misunderstanding?" The old man was obviously stunned. "Oh, what misunderstanding? Tell me." The middle-aged man in embroidered robes shouted first. "This little bastard just sells some cheap goods, and he wants the shopkeeper to meet him in person. Isn't it obvious that he is here to make trouble?" The old man glanced at the huge animal skin bag beside Lin Sun and said coldly, "Young man, is this the misunderstanding you said?" Lin Sun said seriously, "I just want to meet your shopkeeper. Is that called making trouble?" The old man was stunned and said in a low voice, "Anyway, let him go first." Lin Sun shook his head. "I can't agree unless your shopkeeper comes." A killing intent flashed in the old man's eyes. "It seems that you are going to refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." Lin Sun said with a smile, "Sorry, old man. I'm not scared." At the same time, he pinched the middle-aged man in embroidered robes so hard that he almost suffocated and his face turned red. The threat was self-evident. "Don't worry about me. Kill this bastard first." The middle-aged man in embroidered robes shouted in a hurry. At this moment, a majestic voice sounded. "What are you shouting and shouting?" The shopkeeper came. Suddenly, everyone present showed a touch of awe. Even the old man kept silent. "It seems that if I don't make such a big noise, I really can't see the shopkeeper." Lin Sun muttered to himself and looked in the direction of the voice. A middle-aged man in a navy blue robe walked over. He had 3 strands of willow whiskers under his chin and an elegant face. His every movement was dignified. This man was Yin Jun, the shopkeeper of Keystone Business. "Young man, let him go first." As soon as Yin Jun appeared, he said calmly, "I can give you a chance to explain." "Okay." Lin Sun let go of the middle-aged man in embroidered robes without worrying whether he would be killed on the spot after doing so. Yin Jun was a little surprised. He waved his hand to signal the crowd to leave and said, "I hope your explanation won't let me down." Lin Sun smiled and didn't explain anything. Instead, he took out a token and threw it to Yin Jun. "Look at this first." Yin Jun frowned, but when he took the token and looked at it, his eyes narrowed and his expression changed slightly imperceptibly. He blurted out, "Where did you get this token?" Seeing this, all the people nearby were stunned. Did this token have any origin? Lin Sun answered concisely, "Someone gave it to me." Yin Jun pondered for a long time and suddenly took a deep breath. A touch of fierceness flashed through his eyes. "Someone gave it to you? Do you think I will believe it? This token is not something a young man like you can have. Tell me the truth, or don't blame me for being rude." The token was real. Yin Jun could be sure that the unique mark on it was absolutely not fake. But in his opinion, it was impossible for a teenager to have this token. Obviously, Yin Jun had regarded Lin Sun as a thief who came to Keystone Business with a token to swindle people. Lin Sun couldn't help feeling annoyed. The middle-aged man in brocade said that he was not qualified to meet the shopkeeper and deliberately came to pick a fight with him. When he met the shopkeeper, the middle-aged man obviously questioned Lin Sun as a liar. How could Lin Sun keep calm? But he still wore a smile on his face and sighed. It seems that Shi Xuan lied. It's useless to have his token. Shi Xuan. This was the name of the eldest child. Yin Jun's face changed slightly again. He couldn't help but hesitate. "Young man, did the eldest child send you here?" The others present were also shocked. How could this shabbily dressed young man know the eldest child, Shi Xuan? It was impossible. This guy must be fooling them. How could the eldest child make friends with a poor young man? At this time, when he heard Yin Jun said that he was sent by Shi Xuan, Lin Sun couldn't help but be speechless. Was he the kind of person who could only listen to others in their eyes? Although it was not snobbish, it was obvious that they never really took Lin Sun seriously. But Lin Sun also understood that many people in the world were like this, so he was not angry about it. Chapter 58. Mu Wansu returned to the Green Sun tribe alone 2 days ago in order to find out more about Shai Yutong, the young Sword King. The Green Sun tribe was undoubtedly the best choice to inquire about Shai Yutong. In Mu Wansu's view, since Shai Yutong had come to the 3,000 Mountains, he was bound to choose the Green Sun tribe as his temporary residence. As long as she found out if anyone had seen Shai Yutong recently, she could probably figure out when he arrived at the 3,000 Mountains. It was Sher Xuan's idea to do so. Mu Wansu didn't understand why the young master was so anxious to meet Shai Yutong. Was it just to see the uniqueness of the invincible Sword Sutra? Or did the young master think that Shai Yutong had found the peerless treasure? But whether she understood or not, Mu Wansu had to act. It had been 2 days since she returned to the Green Sun tribe, but so far she had not found any news about Shai Yutong. Mu Wansu couldn't help but feel helpless. Shai Yutong was so mysterious that it wasn't easy to find out anything about him. Fortunately, tonight, Mu Wansu received news that a golden flame beast, which had not appeared in the world for hundreds of years, had appeared by a river thousands of miles away from the Green Sun tribe. It was highly likely that it had something to do with the peerless treasure, and it was said that Lu Yukuan, the eldest son of Lu Wujuan, the governor of the southwestern province of the empire, was killed by this beast. This was shocking news, and it was sufficient to cause a great uproar. Mu Wansu had made up her mind to investigate the whereabouts of this golden flame beast tomorrow morning. However, to Mu Wansu's surprise, on this night, when she was going to discuss something with Yin Jun, the shopkeeper of Keystone Business, she saw the shameless and cunning boy again. At this moment, Mu Wansu stood in the distance, watching Lin being questioned by Yin Jun and surrounded by people like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt a touch of joy in her heart. "Little bastard, you deserve this." Mu Wansu couldn't wait for Yin Jun to teach this shameless boy a good lesson in venom anger. But as soon as this idea came to her mind, she found that the little bastard in the distance was looking at her. Mu Wansu's heart thumped. Just as she was about to dodge, it was already too late. The little bastard waved his hand in surprise and shouted, "Sister Wansu, what a coincidence. Prove to them what's the matter with this token. Brother Sher Xuan never said that I would be treated coldly if I entered Keystone Business with this token." Mu Wansu was completely speechless. She held her forehead with her hand. How could this guy be so shameless? He called her so intimately. If she didn't know better, she would really think that it had something to do with her. Mu Wansu wanted to turn around and leave as if she didn't know him. However, she remembered that the token was indeed given to her by the eldest young master Sher Xuan. If the eldest young master found out about this, it wouldn't be right. What to do? Mu Wansu hesitated. If it was possible, she really wanted to grab that little bastard's ear and fiercely ravage it. It was simply too infuriating. Even when asking for help, he acted so righteously. Seeing this scene, Yin Jun and others couldn't help but feel puzzled. They all looked into the distance and immediately saw Mu Wansu in the distance. Mu Wansu was still in a black dress. Her hair was tied up in a bun. Her face was beautiful and delicate, and her figure was graceful. Her eyebrows were straight, but there was a sharp spirit like a knife between them. She was like a wild rose in full bloom on the cliff, delicate and beautiful, but with thorns. Seeing her, Yin Jun's pupils suddenly shrank. He said in a daze, "Miss Wansu, do you know this young man?" Others were also puzzled. Mu Wansu sighed in her heart. She could only walk over and lightly opened her red lips, saying, "This token was indeed given by the eldest young master." She didn't answer directly, but the meaning of her words was clear. In an instant, Yin Jun's doubts were swept away. Mu Wansu was the person in charge of Keystone Business in Donglin Town. Even Yin Jun's status was far lower than hers. Most importantly, Yin Jun was very clear that Mu Wansu had been helping the eldest young master these days. How could her words be false? It seemed that he had wronged this young man. Yin Jun thought in his heart. When he looked at Lin Sun again, his eyes had changed. He didn't know why the eldest young master would give such a precious token to this young man. But since the eldest young master did so, there must be a reason. The expressions of the middle-aged man and others changed continuously. Was this young man a friend of the eldest young master? If the eldest young master knew what happened today, they dared not to think about it, especially the middle-aged man. He couldn't help regretting his rude behavior just now. But how could he know at that time that this shabbily dressed young man had such a powerful background? At this time, the middle-aged man suddenly saw Lin's son turn around and look at him. His heart thumped, thinking that Lin's son was going to get even with him. Unexpectedly, Lin's son cupped his hands apologetically and said, "I was impulsive just now. It's my fault. Please forgive me, uncle." The middle-aged man was stunned and said subconsciously, "It's okay. It's just a misunderstanding. Please don't take it to heart, child." Lin's son smiled and said no more. Seeing this, Yinjun waved his hand and said, "You can all leave." As he said, he led Lin's son and Mu Wansu along a long corridor into an elegant room and sat down separately. "May I know your name, child?" Yinjun's attitude had become upright and enthusiastic. He was quite elegant, so he talked with a smile, which made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. "Senior, you are too polite. My name is Lin's son." Lin's son smiled and cupped his hands. Mu Wansu sat alone on one side, absent-mindedly playing with a delicate teacup. It seemed that she didn't want to be involved in this conversation at all. Her attitude made Yinjun feel a little strange, but he still said with a smile, "Child Lin, it's my fault today. Please don't take it to heart." Yinjun was polite, but Lin's son was even more polite. He quickly stood up and cupped his hands, looking ashamed and apologetic. "Senior, you are too polite. It's my fault. How can you blame others?" Yinjun couldn't figure out Lin's son's mind. Lin's son was so arrogant in the hall just now. Why did he become so humble now? With that in mind, Yinjun opened his mouth and said, "If I may be so bold as to ask, young lord, if you had taken out your medallion earlier, perhaps this misunderstanding wouldn't have happened." Before Yinjun finished, Lin's son said embarrassedly, "Senior, the situation was urgent at that time. Besides, I really couldn't figure out the use of the token, so I made such a bad plan. I thought that as long as the matter got out of hand, I could definitely alert you to come here." Yinjun was speechless. This brat was quite honest, to be able to speak his mind so frankly. His character could be considered not bad. Unconsciously, Yinjun had a good impression of Lin's son. It was rare for a 13 or 14-year-old boy to have such a mind. The key was that Lin's son was flexible and knew when to advance or retreat. If Yinjun didn't see it with his own eyes, he would doubt that Lin's son was a sophisticated adult. Did you really think so at that time? Suddenly, Mu Wansu opened her mouth and stared at Lin's son with her beautiful eyes like knives. She could tell with a single glance that this little brat had been talking nonsense since the moment he entered the room. He seemed to be very humble, but in reality, the words he said made it impossible for anyone to find fault with him. He was extremely cunning. In particular, Mu Wansu knew that Lin's son wouldn't make such a big noise in public just to lure Yinjun out. Maybe he had other intentions. At this time, Lin's son smiled bitterly and sighed. "Sister Wansu, it's the first time for me to go out of the mountain village in my life. I have no experience and insight. If I do something wrong, please don't hesitate to give me some advice." As he spoke, he bowed to Mu Wansu in a sincere and earnest manner, which made Mu Wansu unable to accuse him of anything, even though she knew he was acting. Otherwise, she would seem to be too stingy. This bastard is getting more and more cunning. Mu Wansu was annoyed in her heart, but she put on a sweet smile and said in a clear voice, "Well, it's over. Don't mention it again. Besides, you are favored by the young master. Even if you make a mistake, everyone can forgive you." "Haha, Miss Wansu is right. Don't mention it again." Yinjun laughed. "By the way, what is your purpose in coming to Keystone Business this time?" Lin Sun's face suddenly became solemn. He cupped his hands and said, "To tell you the truth, I have two things to do this time. Go ahead." Yinjun stroked his beard and smiled. "First, I'm here to sell some goods in exchange for some daily necessities for the villagers of Feiyun Village. At the same time, I hope to reach a trade contract with Keystone Business." Lin Sun said quickly, "Senior, You may not know that Feiyun Village is now rich in Feiyun fire copper. I think Keystone Business needs these spiritual materials, so I plan to sign a trade contract with Keystone Business for the purchase and sale of Feiyun fire copper, which will pave a long-term way for Feiyun Village to make money. Yin Jun raised his eyebrows. Feiyun fire copper? Lin Sun said with a smile. Yes, that's it. Sister Wansu saw it last time when she was a guest in Feiyun Village with the young master. Mu Wansu was also involved in Lin Sun's words. She glared at Lin Sun and finally nodded. He's right. Yin Jun was immediately relieved and said with a smile, well, I can make the decision on this matter. It's a win-win situation. Lin Sun smiled. Thank you, Senior. Once this matter was settled, under the protection of Keystone Business, anyone who dared to touch the Feiyun fire copper would have to go through Keystone Business first. At the same time, because of his relationship with Shi Xuan, Keystone Business wouldn't dare to cheat the villagers of Feiyun Village. In this way, even if Lin left Feiyun Village in the future, he wouldn't have to worry about this matter. Moreover, selling Feiyun fire copper could bring lasting profits to Feiyun Village, which was enough to gradually improve the villagers' lives and make a living. This was killing two birds with one stone. Lin Sun had been planning this matter as early as when he came to Green Sun Tribe. Seeing that it was settled so smoothly, he felt relieved. Child, what's the second matter? Yin Jun asked. Lin Sun glanced at Mu Wansu and then at Yin Jun. Suddenly, a bitter smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Mu Wansu's heart skipped a beat, even though he didn't say anything. She thought to herself, this little bastard is full of evil tricks. He must take this opportunity to raise some thorny issues. Chapter 59. Mu Wansu said almost subconsciously, don't tell me. Yin Jun was also stunned. What was going on? In his impression, Mu Wansu rarely lost control like this. On the contrary, she was beautiful, wise, and resourceful. She was also a famous and powerful figure in Donglin Town. The nickname Black Rose was not for nothing. However, ever since she met Lin Sun, she suddenly found that all the schemes and means she had in the past were useless. Moreover, every time she saw Lin Sun, she felt as if she was unlucky. She was used again and again. She could only endure the bitterness, unable to express it. This feeling really made Mu Wansu feel aggrieved. At this moment, when she saw Lin Sun's bitter face, she couldn't help but vent her anger. Lin Sun sighed as if he didn't notice it. Sister Wansu, we have to let Senior Yinjin know about this. Otherwise, I'm afraid there will be some misunderstanding. Mu Wansu was stunned. What did he mean? Did he think she already knew what he was going to say? But soon, Mu Wansu understood the purpose of Lin Sun's words. Yin Jun said seriously, since Miss Wansu also knows about this, please tell us directly. Don't worry about any misunderstanding. Even if it's a big trouble, we have to discuss it and come up with a solution. Mu Wansu was completely speechless. Yin Jun was too cooperative. Lin Sun looked solemn. He took a deep breath and was about to say something. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Lin Sun couldn't help frowning, but Mu Wansu immediately smiled. This was God's help. Yin Jun stood up and said, someone still rashly knocks at this time. Something urgent must have happened. Saying this, he opened the door. A waiter stood outside with a trace of surprise on his face. What happened? Yin Jun asked directly. Manager, Wu Daong, the manager of Wu Business, came with a large group of people. They want us to hand over a person. The waiter said quickly. Yin Jun was stunned and his face darkened. Hand over who? Is Wu Daong here to make trouble? Lin Sun stood up and said helplessly, Senior, they should be here to deal with me. The smile on Mu Wansu's lips suddenly froze. How could she not understand that the second thing Lin Sun was about to say was related to Wu Business? He was tricked by this bastard again. Mu Wansu gnashed her teeth in hatred. Yinjin exclaimed, Catch you? Why is that? Lin Sun quickly told the story about Wu Henshui, insisting that Wu Henshui was killed by the villagers in order to occupy all the spiritual fields and Feiyun Fire Copper Mine in Feiyun Village. At the same time, he also said that as soon as he entered the Green Sun Tribe, he was hunted by Wu Business. In desperation, he had to come to Keystone Business for help. Yin Jun frowned. I see. He also felt that things were a little tricky. The owner of Wu Business was a big shot in Donglin Town. Even Keystone Business was reluctant to offend such a local bully easily. But when he thought of the relationship between Lin Sun and Shi Xuan, Yin Jun knew that he had to help Lin Sun, but he was bound to pay a high price. For a moment, Yin Jun couldn't help hesitating and looked at Mu Wansu. Mu Wansu also felt a headache coming on. This little bastard was really good at making trouble. He had just entered the Green Sun tribe and had already made such a big noise. If the eldest young master knew about this, would he regret giving away the token? In Mu Wansu's opinion, she couldn't wait to send Lin Sun to Wu Business so that she could vent her anger. But the reality didn't allow her to do so. Mu Wansu sighed in her heart. Well, she would help him again this time. If he went too far in the future, even if she had to bear the blame of the eldest child, she would draw a clear line with this little bastard. Mu Wansu's eyebrows showed a touch of sharpness and decisiveness. Yin Jun, go tell them that Lin Sun is a member of Keystone Business, and tell them to behave themselves. Yin Jun understood tacitly and left in a hurry. Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help saying, Sister Wansu, I don't care about my safety. What I care about is the safety of the villagers in Feiyun Village. If they want to vent their anger on Feiyun Village, I'd rather not help. At the end of his words, his expression became resolute. Mu Wansu gazed at him for a long time and couldn't help nodding. Although you don't leave a good impression on me, I can promise you that I won't let this matter affect Feiyun Village. Lin Sun solemnly cupped his hands. Thank you very much. I will remember your kindness and pay you back 10 times in the future. Seeing Lin Sun's serious look, Mu Wansu felt slightly uncomfortable. She waved her hand and said, I don't ask you to pay me back, but please don't make trouble for me in the future. Lin Sun nodded and said nothing. As the saying goes, it's a taboo to talk too deep with a shallow acquaintance. He knew what he did today was a bit too much, but he could only do it now. Whether it was for the sake of the villagers in Feiyun Village or to find a temporary shelter for himself. Not long after, Yin Jun returned and said with a smile, the matter has been solved. With Wu Deyong's courage, even the big shot in Donglin Town behind him can only endure when facing our Keystone Business. Lin Sun got up again, thanked Yin Jun again and again, and left soon after. Miss Wansu, what's the relationship between the lad and the eldest child? Yin Jun couldn't help asking as soon as Lin Sun left. Mu Wansu answered absent-mindedly. The eldest child said that the lad has a promising future. Apart from that, he didn't say anything else. Even I can't figure it out. Yin Jun was stunned. He had thought that Lin Sun and the eldest child were close friends. Who would have thought that it was such a strange relationship? Mu Wansu took a deep breath and said, Forget it. Let's not talk about him. The eldest child may return to Green Sun Tribe in 2 days. You have to be prepared. Saying this, she got up and left. But inexplicably, she thought of Lin Sun. She didn't know whether the lad understood her meaning or not. She hoped that he would not use the token of the eldest child to intimidate others in the future. Otherwise, she would not spare him. When Lin Sun walked out of Keystone Business, it was already late at night. There were few people on the street. Scattered dim yellow lights sprinkled on the road. It was cold and quiet. Lin Sun led the scaly horse forward. He didn't encounter any ambush along the way. Judging from this, Wu Business did retreat after receiving the warning from Keystone Business. It seemed that the outcome of this confrontation of forces had been decided silently. But for the first time, Lin Sun knew the real meaning of the so-called forces. Old Crow Inn. When Lin Sun returned, the owner, the one-eyed bruiser, was sleeping behind the counter. But when he saw Lin Sun, he woke up with a shudder. There was shock, fear, and awe on his face. Sorry to bother you again. Can you get a room for me? Lin Sun smiled and handed over 20 copper coins. No, only 5 copper coins are enough. The one-eyed bruiser said quickly. What happened tonight caused a sensation in the Green Sun tribe. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen to the young man. But the final result surprised everyone. Wu Business admitted defeat. It was also at that time that the one-eyed bruiser realized that the young man had a close relationship with Keystone Business. No wonder he dared to kill Mad Dog Wu Jie without hesitation. He must have something to rely on. Lin Sun didn't stand on ceremony. He took back the 15 copper coins and walked into a room under the guidance of a waiter who nodded and bowed. The moment the door was closed, the smile on Lin Sun's lips disappeared. He stood in front of the window, looking at the vast night in the distance. A rare trace of loneliness hung on his handsome and warm face. After a long time, he shook his head, put out the light, and lay on the bed in the dark. That night, Lin Sun didn't practice for the first time. The next morning, when Lin Sun left the Old Crow Inn, the usual warm smile hung on his lips again, and he looked radiant. In the daytime, the Green Sun tribe was very prosperous, bustling with people coming and going. Everywhere was full of hustle and bustle. Lin Sun drank a bowl of soybean milk brewed with green spirit beans and ate 10 steamed buns stuffed with black bull beef from a stall on the street. He touched his belly with satisfaction and went straight to Keystone Business. This time, it was still the middle-aged man in brocade clothes who received him. His name was Shu Liang, an experienced treasure appraiser. Compared with last time, Shu Liang was obviously much more enthusiastic. After helping Lin Sun estimate the goods in the big animal skin bag, he personally helped Lin Sun get 43 silver coins, which was equivalent to 4,300 copper coins. Lin Sun knew that the price Shu Liang gave him was not only fair, but also much more generous. Lin Sun naturally knew why. However, he didn't refuse. When selling the 150 kilograms of Feiyun fire copper hidden in the storage ring, Lin Sun insisted on paying according to the market price. This greatly surprised Shu Liang, and he couldn't help changing his impression of Lin Sun. The original grudge in his heart also disappeared. In the end, 150 kilograms of Feiyun fire copper was exchanged for 550 silver coins, which equaled to 55,000 copper coins. This was a shocking amount of wealth. In the following shopping, Lin Sun deeply understood the purchasing power of this wealth. All the daily necessities he bought for the villagers of Feiyun only amounted to 1,500 copper coins, which equaled to 15 silver coins. And this batch of necessities was enough for the villagers of Feiyun to live for half a year. In addition, Lin Sun ordered a batch of spiritual medicine from Keystone Business, namely Qi Drawing Pill, Internal Strengthening Pill, Viscera Dredging Powder, and Aperture Dredging Liquid. Although each of them was ordinary, they were all necessary for practitioners of martial realm. They were prepared for the children of the village who were about to embark on the road of cultivation. In addition, Lin Sun also bought some spiritual ink for inscribing spiritual tattoos for himself and some clothes for himself and Xie Ji respectively. The total value of these items was only equivalent to 400 silver coins, which showed how amazing the purchasing power of the imperial currency was. However, it was also extremely difficult to make money. If Lin Sun hadn't sold the 150 kilograms of Feiyun fire copper, he wouldn't have been able to buy so many things at once. Chapter 60. When Lin Sun came out of Keystone Business, he still had 173 silver coins with him, most of which were spent on elixirs and spiritual ink. But there was nothing he could do about it. Items used for cultivation were extremely expensive, and ordinary people couldn't afford them at all. Lin Sun had heard that there were many people in the world who could set foot in cultivation. But because they were too poor and lacked financial support, they had no chance to cultivate all their lives and could only become an ordinary member of the crowd. Fortunately, Lin Sun didn't have to worry about it now. Near noon, Lin Sun decided to set off for Feiyun village. Shu Liang sent 2 guards to help Lin Sun escort the goods. At the same time, the 2 guards were also responsible for purchasing Feiyun fire copper. This time, they followed Lin Sun to explore the way. Every month, they would take the initiative to go to Feiyun village to purchase Feiyun fire copper. In this way, even if Lin Sun left Feiyun village in the future, he wouldn't have to worry about no one escorting and exchanging goods for Feiyun village. Lin Sun knew that this must be the arrangement of Yin Zhen, which indirectly proved that Keystone Business really kept its word. As long as Keystone Business was still in Green Sun Tribe and Lin Sun was still alive, no one dared to break the contract. Moreover, with Keystone Business as his backer, it could ensure that no one dared to touch the wealth of Feiyun Village. Shu Yang personally sent Lin Sun to the outside of Green Sun Tribe, which attracted a lot of attention along the way. But when they recognized that Lin Sun was from Keystone Business, they all withdrew their eyes tacitly. Child Lin, why don't you go to Donglin Town to take the county test with your current age and cultivation? As they talked along the way, Shu Yang was surprised to learn that Lin Sun was only 13 years old this year. Lin Sun was stunned. County test, Shu Yang explained patiently. Every other year, the Empire carries out a series of selections to recruit outstanding talents from all over the world. According to Shu Yang, in order to select talents, Xiao Empire set up county test, state test, province test, and nation test according to different regions. It was easy to understand. Xiao Empire had a vast territory. Except for the Forbidden City, the other territories were divided into 34 provinces. Each province had several states and counties, and each state and county had several prefectures and counties. In short, prefectures and counties, states, provinces, and the capital formed the vast territory of Xiao Empire. In a word, prefectures and counties, states, provinces, and the capital formed the vast territory of Xiao Empire. Among them, the county test was the lowest level of assessment. The conditions for the assessment were also very simple. The age of the examinee must not be more than 15 years old, and they must have a cultivation base. As long as they met this condition, they could pass county test. On the other hand, the requirements of the state examinations were stricter. It required a precise evaluation of the cultivator's aptitude, comprehension, and innate talent. Only the most outstanding cultivators could pass the examination. The assessment of the province test could not be described as strict, but harsh. Even Shuel Yang could not explain the specific assessment content, but he knew that those who could pass the province test were all first-class figures in the world. It was the top test in the Forbidden City, state test, which was the top in. It was the top in the top in the Sun City in the capital. The test was not. It was not to mention that county test, state test. Test. Chen's. Test. If you wanted to take part in nation test, you should be under the age of 18 and pass the approval of county test, state test, and province test. Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help marveling in his heart. No one knew how many amazing talents would emerge in the annual assessment, and if these talents could stand out in the assessment, they would definitely become the mainstay of Xiao Empire and shine brightly in the future as long as there were no accidents. But soon, Lin Sun realized a problem and asked, "Uncle Shu Yang, what are the specific benefits of taking part in the test?" Shu Yang was speechless. After a long time, he said, "There are many benefits. Not only can you get fame, but also many opportunities for promotion. Most importantly, it is of great benefit to your future cultivation." After a pause, he continued, "Take county test as an example. As long as you pass it, you will be favored by many clans, chambers of commerce, military headquarters, and schools. They will try their best to win you over and provide you with the wealth and resources you need for cultivation." Lin Sun was surprised why. Shu Yang said with a smile, "It's very simple. Although it's just a county test, all the participants are young people under the age of 15 with great cultivation. Such people are good seedlings with great potential. If you can win them over and make them a member of your own force, they will definitely bring great benefits to your force in the future." Lin Sun nodded thoughtfully. "I see. But if you don't want to join other forces, there are no other benefits?" Shu Yang said, "Of course not. As long as you pass county test, the Empire will reward you with a sum of money and provide you with the opportunity to take part in state test. As long as you can pass state test, you will get much more benefits than county test. At that time, some big forces will also pay attention to you. If you can pass province test, it will be great. Even if you don't have the opportunity to take part in nation test, you can have a very high status, enjoy endless wealth, and endless cultivation resources. As for nation test, as long as you pass, you can enter Green Deer School. That is the most famous school in the empire and the holy place for cultivation that countless practitioners dream of. When he spoke up to hear, Shuel Yang's voice couldn't help but carry a wisp of excitement, and he revealed an expression of admiration. After a long time, Shu Yang calmed down a little and said with a wry smile, "However, it is not easy to enter Green Deer School. Only 100 students are enrolled every year, and 99% of the practitioners who take part in Nation Test can hardly enter it." Lin Sun silently digested for a long time and couldn't help sighing with emotion. Green Deer School is really powerful. At least the surface of the currency in circulation in the empire is branded with patterns related to it. Shuel Yang felt the same way and said, "Isn't that right? By the way, the examinations of the empire to select talents are not easy, and each examination is full of knowledge. If you're willing to take part in it, you can go to Donglin Town to inquire about the specific information. I heard that county test in Donglin Town will begin in 2 months." Lin Sun nodded. "I will think about it carefully." As they talked, they had arrived at the Green Sun tribe. Here, Lin Sun took the initiative to leave. "Uncle Shu Yang, you don't have to see me off." Shu Yang nodded. "Well, take care." Lin Sun smiled, turned around, and galloped away on the scaly horse. The 2 guards from Keystone Business escorted the goods and followed him. What this little guy did last night seemed to be reckless, but he is clever and has a deep mind. If there is no accident, he will surely make a name for himself in the future. It's a pity that he was born in a remote and poor place with little knowledge and experience. I'm afraid he will encounter many twists and turns in the future. Shu Yang looked into the distance silently until Lin Sun and the others disappeared. Then he turned back and returned to the Green Sun tribe. At the same time, in Wu Business, Wu Daong sat in the hall. His eyes were bloodshot, and his face was extremely gloomy. He had no idea how a boy from Feiyun Village could become a distinguished guest of Keystone Business, and even Yin Jun, the shopkeeper of Keystone Business, personally stood up for him. Wu Daong had nowhere to vent his anger, so he had to bear it. Keystone Business was too powerful. Not to mention Wu Daong. Even the clan of Wu behind him couldn't afford to offend such a behemoth. Compared with Keystone Business, they were as small as an ant in front of a towering tree. If Keystone Business wanted to make trouble for them, Keystone Business could crush them with a flick of its finger. Therefore, they could only bear it. At this time, a servant hurried to report, "Shopkeeper, the boy has left the Green Sun tribe, accompanied by 2 guards of Keystone Business." Hearing this, the last trace of unwillingness in Wu Daong's heart suddenly disappeared, and his face fell. Keystone Business had sent guards to accompany him. This was obviously a warning to Wu Business not to do something too extreme. "Shopkeeper, are we just going to let it go?" Mad Dog Wu Jia and others were all killed by this boy. Who in the Green Sun tribe doesn't know about this? If we don't solve this problem, how can we raise our heads in the Green Sun tribe in the future? A middle-aged man on the side of the hall said angrily, causing others to nod. Wu Daong shouted angrily, "If we don't let it go, do you still want revenge? Do you want Keystone Business to find an excuse to eradicate us all?" The crowd immediately fell silent. After a long time of breathing, Wu Daong calmed down and said, "This matter is over. Don't mention it again in the future." Someone couldn't help saying, "But now there's still no news of great Deacon Wu Henshui. Are we just going to let it go?" The mention of Wu Henshui made Wu Daong's lips twitch involuntarily. He gritted his teeth and said, "Idiot, that boy single-handedly killed a round trip in the Green Sun tribe. Do you think Wu Henshui can still be alive now?" Everyone was silent. In fact, they also knew that Wu Henshui was probably dead, but they were extremely unwilling to let Lin go like this. This was not only related to their face, but also the reputation of Wu Business in the Green Sun tribe. "Shopkeeper, we can't do it ourselves, but we can find others to do it. Why not hire some desperados to do it?" After a long time, someone made a suggestion. But when Wu Daong heard this, he was so angry that he pounded the table and shouted, "Have you all forgotten what Yin Zhan said last night? As long as something happens to the boy, no matter whether we did it or not, Keystone Business will eradicate us as soon as possible. Do you know what that means? It means that even if the boy dies in the mouth of the fierce beasts, we will suffer the full revenge of Keystone business. A bunch of idiots. Don't use your brain when you speak. The crowd was suddenly depressed, and their hearts were about to explode. This Keystone business had gone too far. Seeing that no one spoke for a long time, Wu Daong took a deep breath and said, "Of course, this must be avenged, but not now. Don't forget that Lien Rufeng, the guard commander of Feiyun village, left with Wu Henshui. I remember that his son, Lien Fei, is now practicing in Donglin Town. When the opportunity comes, Lien Fei may come in handy." At the end of his words, his voice had a touch of coldness. Chapter 61. The boundless mountains rose and fell one after another. Galloping between heaven and earth, Lin Sun thought of his harvest from the Green Sun tribe with mixed feelings in his heart. Some were relaxed, and some were lost. But these were all in the past. Lin Sun had made up his mind to leave with Xia Ji when everything was on the right track. Only by entering the city of Xiao Empire could they have a wider sky. This was the case for both Lin Sun and Xia Ji. Similarly, they couldn't stay in Feiyun village forever for the sake of their future cultivation and finding the enemy who dug away their spiritual veins. This morning, I heard that the golden flame beast had been killed by Shai Yutong, the young Sword King, and the spiritual crystal in its body was also obtained by young Sword King. The spiritual crystal is a priceless treasure. It is said that it is the core treasure of refining the armor of spiritual tattoos. It is extremely rare. The armor of spiritual tattoos? What is it? Only spiritual tattoo masters can refine a powerful equipment for battle. But it's a pity that the spiritual materials needed for such a powerful battle suit are extremely harsh, and it's very complicated and difficult to refine. Even a spiritual tattoo master needs enough opportunities and luck to refine it. So, once the armor of spiritual tattoos is refined successfully, won't it be extremely powerful? Of course, the power of the armor of spiritual tattoos is earth-shattering and unpredictable. Suddenly, a conversation came into Lin Sun's ears, which made him feel excited. The two guards who followed Lin Sun to Feiyun village were from Keystone business. One was Gao Guiyong, and the other was Zhou Quan. Both of them were at the 4th level of martial realm. The Golden Flame Beast was killed by young Sword King? Lin Sun asked. When he was in Green Sun tribe, he also heard about the Golden Flame Beast. He had long determined that the so-called Golden Flame Beast was the golden giant beast he had seen a few days ago. Yes, Gao Guiyong said quickly. He knew that the relationship between Lin Sun and Yin Jun was not trivial, so he dared not neglect Lin Sun. On the other side, Zhou Quan also said, although the Golden Flame Beast was killed, Lu Yuquan couldn't be saved. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes imperceptibly and said in surprise, Lu Yuquan? Yes, it's the eldest son of Lu Wujuan, the governor of the southwestern province of the empire. According to the news, Lu Yuquan and his companions all died in the hands of the Golden Flame Beast, especially Lu Yuquan. I heard that his whole body was burned into a charred corpse. Zhou Quan sighed. I'm afraid this matter will be known by Governor Lu Wujuan in a few days, and I don't know how much trouble it will cause in the future. Only then did Lin Sun know that Lu Yuquan, who had died in his hands, had such a great background. He couldn't help but feel a little strange in his heart. He actually killed the son of a governor by accident, but Lin Sun didn't worry about anything. At least no one knew that Lu Yuquan died in his hands. As night fell, Lin by sun by night by. Night, by and by. After eating their rations, Gao Guiyong and Zhou Quan split up. One of them rested for the first half of the night, while the other rested for the second half of the night. They took turns to guard the place. There were many ferocious beasts in the wilderness, so someone had to keep an eye on them. Seeing this, Lin Sun was relieved and began to practice meditating magic. First, he ran the spirit concentrating manual and guided the spiritual energy in his body to circulate 72 times until it was completed. Without any delay, he meditated and practiced meditating magic. It was not until late at night that Lin Sun opened his eyes and glanced around to make sure there was no danger. Then he concentrated his perception and entered the heaven-accessing place to break through the barrier of milled waterfalls for the fourth time. In the end, Lin Sun failed again without any suspense. Lin Sun had already prepared for this. Compared with this, he cared more about the improvement of his physical strength. Sure enough, after careful perception, Lin Sun found that his skin, flesh, tendons, and bones had been refined again, and his strength was 30% stronger than before. All this was the gift of the Mill Waterfall's current in the spiritual tattoo battlefield. Although he failed every time, it was of great benefit to refining his body. But this time, Lin Sun found that his physical strength had reached a limit, like a bottleneck. If he wanted to improve it again, his strength had to undergo a comprehensive transformation. It seems that I have to start from the cultivation. Lin Sun pondered. He didn't know much about body refining, but he could roughly judge that physical strength and cultivation should be complementary to each other. The breakthrough of cultivation was an internal transformation, while the breakthrough of physical strength was an external transformation. Now that his physical strength had reached a bottleneck, he naturally had to break through from the inside to the outside. Now that Lin Sun's spiritual cultivation had reached the great accomplishment of the aperture guiding level, the fourth level of martial realm, he only needed one step to reach the mastery, and then he could break through the marrow cleansing, the fifth level of martial realm. But Lin Sun didn't worry about it. According to his calculation, he could smoothly enter the fifth level of martial realm within a month with the blood marrow grits and the power of the wine of 4 seasons accumulated in his body last time. At that time, the breakthrough of internal cultivation would inevitably lead to the breakthrough of his physical cultivation, so that his physical strength could enter a new level. For the time being, Lin Sun didn't need to worry about physical strength and cultivation strength. What really made him frown was the cultivation of spiritual tattoos and soul. The cultivation of soul had the star circulation of meditating magic. The only problem was that the progress was a little slow. So far, the second star in his sea of consciousness hadn't been lit. At present, his cultivation could only be regarded as entering the threshold of star circulation, one of the 3 realms of meditating magic. But the cultivation of spiritual tattoos had stagnated for several months due to the lack of the support of a large amount of spiritual ink, which made Lin feel quite helpless. Fortunately, this time he bought a lot of finished spiritual ink in the Green Sun tribe, which solved the problem. All these were only the cultivation of physical strength, cultivation, soul, and spiritual tattoos. In addition, there was also the cultivation of martial arts. For example, marching boxing was still at the precision level, only one step away from the mastery level, but it couldn't break through. Another example was 6-word saber play, which had just reached the nuance level. If one wanted to fully master the power of each martial art, he couldn't avoid the 4 realms of elementary, nuance, precision, and mastery level. Lin Sun admitted that he had only mastered marching boxing and 6-word saber play, but he hadn't mastered all of them to the mastery level, which was a bit unreasonable. What Lin didn't know was that although marching boxing seemed to be a basic martial art, there were very few people in the world who could practice it to the level of precision, not to mention mastery, which was as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Similarly, Lin Sun did not know the origin of the 6-word saber play. But if Master Lu knew that Lin Sun had reached the nuance level of the saber play, he would be deeply shocked. All in all, the reason why Lin Sun thought so was that he was extremely lacking in knowledge and experience about martial arts. After all, he grew up in the Sunless Mind prison, and almost all his life was focused on spiritual tattoos. Master Lu had never taught him martial arts. Even when he taught marching boxing and 6-word saber play, it was to refine Lin's body and wrist flexibility, aiming at better inscribing spiritual tattoos instead of fighting. When Lin Sun arrived in Feiyun village, almost all the people he met were ordinary people, so he couldn't learn more about martial arts. That was why he had a misunderstanding about his own martial arts cultivation. When Lin Sun really entered Xiao Empire in the future, there would be no more misunderstandings when he entered the vast world full of practitioners and forces. This was the lack of experience and knowledge. He couldn't be taught or learned, so he could only explore and comprehend by himself. This was the so-called reading 10,000 books and walking 10,000 miles. When Lin Sun opened his eyes, it was just dawn. The mountain wind whistled in from the entrance of the cave in the morning, bringing a refreshing coolness to his soul. After a night of cultivation, Lin Sun was full of strength and refreshed. He got up and walked out of the cave, only to see Gao Guiyong and Zhou Quan sitting on the scaled horses, waiting for him with their luggage ready. Lin Sun didn't hesitate to mount the scaled horse and set off. On the way, Gao Guiyong and Zhou Quan looked at Lin Sun with a trace of doubt and even a trace of awe. Lin Sun couldn't help being stunned, so he found an opportunity to ask, "Did something happen last night?" Gao Guiyong shook his head. Zhou Quan hesitated for a moment and said, "Child, when you were cultivating last night, your breath suddenly disappeared and we couldn't sense your existence at all. We were so scared that we thought it was an enemy coming to make trouble. But it turned out to be a false alarm." Seeing this, Gao Guiyong also chimed in, "Yes, it was indeed a false alarm. Now it seems that child's cultivation method is extremely unique and has the magical effect of covering one's breath." There was surprise and envy in his voice. A cultivation method that could cover one's breath was not something ordinary people could have. Lin Sun suddenly realized that he might have been in the heaven-accessing place at that time, but he didn't explain anything. Zhou Quan's serious words made Lin Sun's heart flutter. He thought to himself that if he met an enemy he couldn't defeat in the future, he could find a secret place to hide. As long as he entered the heaven-accessing place, the enemy was doomed to be unable to detect his breath. But there was also a drawback in doing so, which was that Lin Sun would also lose his perception of the outside world. Once he was discovered, he wouldn't even know how he died. Therefore, it was better not to use this method unless it was absolutely necessary. Chapter 62. At the mention of Lin Sun, Mu Wansu, who was standing on one side, suddenly felt agitated. She took a deep breath and said, "It's true, but the boy is good at making trouble. In the end, he needs our Keystone business to help him clean up his mess. His intention is really abominable." Shi Xuan was stunned. "What do you mean?" Mu Wansu didn't conceal anything and told Shi Xuan everything that happened that day. Finally, she sneered, "Young master, don't you think this boy is particularly abominable? Even a fox flaunting the tigers might shouldn't do this." Shi Xuan was lost in thought. After a long time, he clapped his hands and laughed. "Lin Sun, I used to think he was a good seedling, but now it seems that I underestimated him at that time. It's really rare for a 13-year-old boy to be so shrewd and resourceful." His voice was full of appreciation. This made Mu Wansu almost doubt whether she had heard wrong. She couldn't help but ask, "Young master, this boy is shameless and cunning. Why do you always praise him?" Shi Xuan stopped smiling and said with emotion, "Let me ask you, was it the first time he entered Green Sun Tribe that day?" Mu Wansu said, "Yes." "Let me ask you again. As soon as he entered Green Sun Tribe, instead of keeping a low profile, he killed Mad Dog Wu Jie and others in public. Do you know why?" Mu Wansu said indignantly, "There's no need to guess. He must have made up his mind to let Keystone business stand up for him. That's why he dares to be so fearless." Shi Xian smiled and said, "That's right. However, you are mistaken about one thing. I was the one who gave him that token in the first place. If he did not make use of it, what value would the token have in his hands?" Mu Wansu was stunned and immediately frowned, but even if he wanted our help, he could have informed us in advance. But he acted first and reported later, which put our Keystone business in a passive position. How could it be? After a pause, she gritted her teeth and said, "The most hateful thing is that after he entered Keystone business, he not only didn't humble himself, but also started a fight, which embarrassed everyone present. If I hadn't been there, I'm afraid that there would have been a big mess." Shi Xuan sighed and said, "This is exactly what he wants." Mu Wansu's frown deepened. She suddenly found that her child's opinion of Lin Sun didn't change after she said so much. On the contrary, he seemed to appreciate Lin Sun more. This caused Mu Wansu to feel aggrieved in her heart. and she said, I know he did it on purpose, and his objective was to draw out manager Yin Jun. Shi Xuan shook his head. This is just one of his purposes. The more important thing is to tell everyone that Lin Sun is in keystone business. Hearing this, Mu Wansu was completely stunned. Why would he do that? Shi Xuan asked. If Lin Sun took the initiative to come here and propose that keystone business deal with Wu Business, would you and Yinjin agree? Mu Wansu hesitated. Although she was unwilling, she had to admit it. She said, I don't think so. He's just a country boy. Even if he has your token, we will save his life at most. If we fall out with Wu Business because of him, it is not in the interest of keystone business. Shi Xuan nodded and said, Yinjun will certainly do the same. So Lin Sun can only take an unconventional approach. With this move, he will draw people of Wu Business to keystone business and force you to make a decision. If keystone business flinched, it will inevitably become the laughingstock of Green Sun tribe, and the reputation of the whole keystone business will be damaged. If keystone business chooses to keep the peace and only protect Lin Sun, it will be too narrow-minded. On the contrary, it will seem that keystone business is afraid of Wu Business. If it is known by others, it will also damage the reputation of keystone business. Speaking of this, Shi Xuan couldn't help laughing. You have seen the result. Wu Business was forced to admit defeat, and Lin Sun became the final winner. Hearing this, Mu Wansu thought of Lin Sun's actions that night and thought about it with Shi Xuan's words. Inexplicably, she felt a touch of horror in her heart. She said, Young master, don't you think too highly of him? Shi Xuan said indifferently, I know you are prejudiced against Lin Sun, but if you really calm down, you will not think so. Mu Wansu fell into silence, but her heart couldn't calm down for a long time. She silently thought about all the actions of Lin Sun that night, but still found it difficult to agree with him. Don't forget, he's just a teenager from a remote mountain village. He's only 13 or 14 years old. It's his first time entering a place like the Green Sun tribe, yet he's already able to turn the tides overnight. All he's been relying on is a token that's useless to me. Shi Xuan sighed with emotion. Not simple, not simple. Mu Wansu was obviously a little discouraged, but she was still not convinced. She said, This is your token. How could it be useless? If it were not for this token, I am afraid he would have been cut into pieces by Wu Business. Shi Xuan frowned and glanced at Mu Wansu. He said, If it were not for this token, according to Lin Sun's wisdom and skills, there would be other solutions. At least, he would not have exposed his identity to Wu Business so quickly. Remember, never act on impulse, or you are bound to suffer a big loss in the future. Mu Wansu looked solemn and nodded. You are right. I will bear it in mind. Shi Xuan thought for a while and suddenly asked, Wansu, have you ever been to the Forbidden City? Mu Wansu shook her head. It is the capital. I am afraid I will never have the chance to enter it in my life. Shi Xuan continued, If one day you have the opportunity to enter the Forbidden City, but you are targeted by some enemies who want to kill you when you just enter the city. These enemies are very powerful, and you have no power to fight against them. What will you do? Mu Wansu pursed her lips and said, Either run away or seek protection from others. Shi Xuan said, But if others don't want to offend these enemies, what will you do? Mu Wansu's expression suddenly changed. She suddenly understood that Shi Xuan was comparing her with Lin Sun. Indeed, Lin Sun came to the Green Sun tribe from a remote mountain village, just like Mu Wansu came to the Forbidden City from Donglin Town. In the same situation, what would she do? Mu Wansu completely understood. She took a deep breath and bowed. Thank you for your advice, young master. In her heart, Mu Wansu still retained her prejudice against Lin Sun. This guy had taken advantage of her too many times and made her suffer again and again. How could she forgive him so easily? Mu Wansu had made up her mind. Although the young master appreciated Lin Sun, she would never give Lin Sun a chance to take advantage of her in the future. Shi Xuan smiled and waved his hand. It's just a trifle. Just pay attention to it in the future. After all, Lin Sun is too young and inexperienced. I'm afraid it will take a long time for him to rise. If he can break into the Forbidden City one day, maybe I will invite him to Keystone Business in person. As for now, just take it as a good karma with him. Whether he is a dragon or a snake, it all depends on him. Mu Wansu nodded repeatedly. That's right. Shi Xuan glanced at her and couldn't help shaking his head. He knew that Mu Wansu's prejudice against Lin Sun could not be resolved in a short time, so he didn't say anything more. Suddenly, Shi Xuan seemed to think of something and said in a low voice, "Now Shai Yutong has killed the golden flame beast and left with the Origin's spiritual crystal. I'm afraid that he wants to return home and ask the elders of his family to help him refine the scarlet butterfly jade armor. If he succeeds in refining it, his fighting capacity will only become more horrible in the future. At that time, the top 30 of the golden list of Spirit Sea of the Empire will have some changes." Mu Wansu was surprised. Is the scarlet butterfly jade armor so powerful? Shi Xuan nodded. That's the secret of CF family in Black Clothes Alley. When used with the sword scripture, it can produce incredible power. Speaking of this, Shi Xuan stood up and said with a determined look, "It's time for me to go home. Shai Yutong has his own chance, but I can't admit defeat." Mu Wansu hurriedly said, "Young master, if you leave, what about the peerless treasure? Do you just give it up?" Shi Xuan shook his head and said, "There's no need to investigate it anymore. If I'm right, this treasure may not exist at all. Even if it exists, I'm afraid it has already been obtained by others. Don't forget that the peerless treasure mentioned by the Flamen of the Imperial Observatory is originally a speculation, not a fact. In this case, it's not worth wasting more energy." Saying this, he pushed the door open and floated away. On this day, not only Shi Xuan left, but also many other top figures who gained nothing in the 3,000 mountains also floated away disheartened. The storm caused by the peerless treasure came to an end after Shai Yutong killed the golden flame beast. But the storm about the 3,000 mountains didn't end because of this. The turmoil caused by Lu Yuquin's death had just begun. But for now, all this had nothing to do with Lin Sun for the time being. After running for another day, Lin Sun finally saw the familiar Feiyun village in the evening, and his worried heart was completely relieved. Along the way, there were no more twists and turns except for several fierce beast attacks. Uncle Lin Sun is back. A group of kids who were playing at the entrance of the village cheered at once when they saw Lin Sun and ran to the village to spread the news. Before long, the village head Shirao Tianren came with a group of villagers, all looking excited and happy. Lin Sun also felt warm in his heart. Perhaps only in Feiyun village could he enjoy the warmth that others couldn't give him, which was very precious. Lin Sun dismounted from the horse, introduced Gao Guiyong and Zhou Quan to Shirao Tianren, and briefly talked about the harvest this time. Then he left everything else and hurried home alone. He didn't see Xia Ji just now. Although it had only been 4 or 5 days, he was really worried about how the little girl was doing these days. When he pushed open the gate and walked into the courtyard, Lin Sun saw Xia Ji sitting at the stone table under the weeping willow, eating alone. The setting sun sprinkled fine golden halos on the little girl, making her look exceptionally tranquil and holy. Seeing Lin Sun, Xia Ji stood up, took out a pair of chopsticks from the kitchen, and filled a bowl of spiritual rice for Lin Sun. She put it on the opposite side of the stone table and said, "Let's eat." There was no excitement, no cheering, and not even a little concern. But Lin Sun smiled, and his heart was full of warmth. If he remembered correctly, this should be the first time Xia Ji helped him with a bowl and chopsticks since she came into his life, and also the first time she helped him fill a bowl of rice. This was the way Xia Ji welcomed him back, as unique as her.